Chapter 123. Stop! Without waiting for Tianyu and the others to step forward to capture him, Gu Dingtian's face was filled with anger. He stood in front of Tianyu and the others and looked at Yi Xian with extreme anger. Your martial security department sure has guts to ignore the martial Dao Heavenly Palace and cause trouble here. Gu Dingtian shouted angrily. A large number of ancient warriors appeared behind him, including several primordial experts. The two sides confronted each other. It was obvious that Gu Dingtian didn't put the martial security department in his eyes at all. He glared at Yi Xian and said, Yi Xian, when this old man sent someone to invite you, not only did you not give face to the martial Dao Heavenly Palace, you even crippled my people's limbs. This old man hasn't settled this debt with you yet, but now you actually dare to bully me? Do you really think that there's no one in my martial Dao Heavenly Palace? Humph, the martial Heavenly Palace is too arrogant. Instead of fighting with the exotic beasts, they framed us. Today's matter is not over. I'll report this to the Supreme Court and punish you for abusing your power. That's right. Although we're just businessmen, the martial Heavenly Palace has gone too far by bullying us like this. Tianyu's face turned pale. He knew that things had gotten out of hand. Not only had the martial Dao Heavenly Palace offended the martial Dao Heavenly Palace, but they had also offended all the famous figures in the business world. If today's matter was reported to the higher-ups, they would definitely be punished. Qi. Bloodlight filled the air as sword qis buzzed. A stream of fresh blood splattered out. The head of the merchant who had been shouting the loudest was separated from his body, turning into a cold corpse that fell limp to the ground. The entire charity banquet fell dead silent. Thud thud thud. Yi Xian walked forward slowly with the 3-foot bloodsword in his hand. He looked around at the crowd and said in a cold voice, all the land in the world belongs to the king and all the people in the land are the king's subjects. The martial Heavenly Palace is the most important weapon of the Xia country. We have the right to act first and report later. If anyone dares to make a fuss, you will end up like this man. Hiss. The sound of people sucking in a breath of cold air could be heard continuously. Everyone present unconsciously retreated. They looked at Yi Xian with a hint of fear in their eyes. Yi Xian killed on the spot without any reason. This was the attitude that Yi Xian had displayed. How could this not make everyone present feel terrified? Yi Xian. Gu Dingtian's eyes were bloodshot as he roared at Yi Xian. It was obvious that Yi Xian had killed someone in front of him. Not only did he not give face to the martial Heavenly Palace, he was also slapping Gu Dingtian's face. How could he not be furious? Today I'm here. Let's see how you're going to take him away. Gu Dingtian waved his hand and the martial artists behind him showed their terrifying qi. Several primordial experts stepped forward and looked at Tianyu and the others with disdain. Mister, they have the advantage in numbers. Furthermore, the martial Dao Heavenly Palace was created by Senior Saber God. They are not as good as us. Tianyu reminded in a low voice. His eyes were filled with fear. Humph. Looking at Tianyu's fearful expression, Yi Xian snorted coldly. A hint of disappointment flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian had never expected that the Martial Security Bureau would become so weak in just half a year. Was it still the national treasure that he remembered? Although Tianyu's voice was soft, it was heard by Gu Dingtian. Gu Dingtian smiled disdainfully and said, Yi Xian, I advise you to go back to where you came from. I'll pretend that nothing happened today. Otherwise, if Senior Saber God knows about this, he will not let it go easily. Haha. Gu Dingtian's taunting words immediately caused a lot of laughter. This also made Tianyu and the others blush. Apparently, they felt extremely humiliated. The Martial Security Bureau, which used to be superior, was humiliated by Gu Dingtian. No matter how good-tempered Tianyu and the others were, they were filled with anger at this moment. Yi Xian sneered. He looked at Tianyu and the others deeply and said, see? This is the current situation of the Martial Security Bureau. If you want to leave, you can leave now. But I have to tell you that from today on, the Martial Security Bureau will become a joke. Damn it. The leader of the Hong group was a hot-tempered man, and he was also an extremely hot-blooded man. He was the first to be unable to endure Gu Dingtian's ridicule. He cupped his hands towards Yi Xian and said with a flushed face, Mr. Yi, the members of my Hong group are at Mr. Ye's disposal, so will we. Everyone had a temper, let alone the members of the Martial Security Bureau. Under the response of many leaders, Yi Xian showed a strange smile on his face and said in a low voice, "Those who violently resist the law will be killed. Those who refuse to confess will be killed. Do you understand me? The Martial Security Bureau is handling a case. Idlers, please leave." Tianyu roared and asked the others to start arresting people. Gu Dingtian's expression changed slightly. He did not expect Yi Xian to have such a great influence in the Martial Security Bureau. Today this old man would like to see just who you can capture. Stop them for me. Since they had already offended each other, Gu Dingtian had nothing to fear. He waved his hand and the warriors behind him smiled ferociously and rushed to the people of the Martial Security Bureau. Bang! The air exploded and swords flew across the sky. The two sides fought together and turned the whole charity banquet into a chaotic place. Shouts, roars, clanging of metals and swords collided. A large number of businessmen screamed and some timid people even crawled under the table for fear of being hurt. At this moment, Yi Xian put his hands behind his back and looked calm. He had no intention of taking any action. He looked at the chaotic battle indifferently as if he was watching a child's play. In fact, Yi Xian did not have to go through so much trouble. With his cultivation and means, he could kill all the martial artists of the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace in an instant. Under his extreme means, these ordinary people would have to kneel down and bow to him. However, Yi Xian did not do so and did not want to do so, because Yi Xian knew that if he did everything by himself, what was the use of the people of the Martial Security Bureau? Why did he build the Mansion of the Dead in the first place? Moreover, Yi Xian did not come here just to find trouble with the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace. He did not care about these so-called businessmen at all. Yi Xian's real purpose was to find the man with the grimace. As for these small fries, Yi Xian would naturally leave them to Tianyu and the others. If they had to deal with such trivial matters personally, they would be treated as trash by Yi Xian. The two sides fought fiercely, but it was obvious that the Martial Security Bureau was at a disadvantage. After all, only Tianyu was a Khanate Realm warrior in the Martial Security Bureau, while the other side had 3 Khanate Realm experts. Although Shuejiayi was a demon and in the Foundation Establishment Realm, she had already broken through to the Khanate Realm. However, she did not dare to show the strength of the Foundation Establishment Realm. After all, it would expose her identity. When Yi Xian was watching indifferently, a figure caught his attention. He narrowed his eyes and walked towards the person. Chapter 124. You know me? When Yi Xian arrived in front of the blonde man, his voice was very calm, but it made people feel as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. Yi Xian's arrival made the blonde man hold his breath. Then, he revealed a noble smile and said, "The president of the Moore Group Xia Country Branch, Michelle, greets Mr. Yi." The blonde man was gentle and elegant. His posture was neither arrogant nor humble. He displayed the unique temperament of a Western noble. No one could find fault with him. More groups, Michelle? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. He sized up the blonde man with a scrutinizing gaze. After a full 10 breaths, an unfathomable smile appeared on his face. "I think I've seen you somewhere before," Yi Xian said softly. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Michelle's expression did not change. Instead, he smiled and said, "Mr. Yi, you must be joking. Although I've lived in Xia country for many years, I've never seen you before." "Oh," Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'm very sensitive to auras. As long as I've seen someone before, as long as they appear before me again, I can recognize them even if they turn into ashes." Buzz! The 3-foot-long blood sword suddenly appeared across the blonde man's throat. Yi Xian smiled strangely and said, "Do you think I'm right, Mr. Anter?" The cold tip of the sword in Yi Xian's strange and sinister gaze made the blonde man's expression change. He forced a smile and said, "Mr. Yi, what are you talking about? Why can't I understand?" "It doesn't matter if you don't understand. I'll let you slowly understand." Yi Xian smiled cruelly. When the sword slashed out, it directly cut off Michelle's right arm. A large amount of blood spurted out, causing the blonde man to cry out in pain. However, he did not resist at all. "Ah, Mr. Yi, why did you hurt me?" The blonde man was sweating profusely from the pain as he cried out in horror. Looking at the blonde man's appearance, Yi Xian frowned. Could it be that he had guessed wrong? Was this person really not the masked man? Yi Xian had only met the masked man twice. The first time was when he came to Jingdu. The plane he was on had been attacked by terrorists, and the two of them had only met once. The second time was because of the Nangong family. He had seen the Grimace Man through a video call. Although this person's eyes and temperament were not similar to the man with the ghost face, Yi Xian, as a cultivator in the tribulation passing stage, was very sensitive to auras. He was very sure that this Michelle was the incarnation of the man with the ghost face. Yi Xian snapped out of his thoughts. He believed in his own judgment, which made him smile mockingly. I have to say you're a drama queen. If it were anyone else they might really believe you. But in front of me your acting is so clumsy. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the blond man's expression changed slightly. However, he still cried out in grief and trembled. Mr. Yi, I really don't know what you're talking about. Please don't hurt me. If you want money, my Moore group will not be stingy. Looking at the blond man who was like a drama queen, Yi Xian slowly shook his head and sneered. I have to say you are a formidable person. Even in front of me you are extremely calm. Your acting can be said to be flawless. Unfortunately, you still revealed a huge flaw. What flaw? The blond man trembled as he spoke. Then, he suddenly woke up and hurriedly shut his mouth. However, his expression gradually turned cold. There was no longer the gentle and elegant temperament from before. Looking at the golden-haired man's change, Yi Xian laughed sinisterly and said, even an ordinary person would be able to dodge that slash of mine, but you didn't react at all. You allowed me to cut off your arm, and this is your biggest flaw. As Yi Xian's words fell, the golden-haired man's eyebrows drooped. His entire body was trembling, and a sinister laughter came out of his mouth. His entire temperament had changed drastically. The golden-haired man slowly raised his head. His face was filled with a sinister expression as he said in a cold voice, I didn't expect that I would be so smart that you would recognize me. At this point, the golden-haired man paused for a moment before continuing with a sinister smile. But so what if you recognize me? Yi Xian, I have to admit that I'm not as shrewd as you in terms of means. However, you should know that I'm now the president of the Great Xia branch of the Moore Group, and also the most distinguished guest of the martial arts divine mansion. You can't keep me here today. The golden-haired man laughed sinisterly. He got up quickly and ran directly to Gu Dingtian. He even cried for help, Mr. Gu, help me. Yi Xian wants to kill me. Gu Dingtian was leading his men to fight with the members of the Martial Security Department. When he heard the golden-haired man's cry for help, his expression changed greatly, and he looked at him. When Gu Dingtian saw the golden-haired man covered in blood and lost an arm, he was completely stunned. Then, his face became extremely furious. Yi Xian, you bastard, how dare you hurt Mr. Michel? As Gu Dingtian roared, the two sides instantly separated. Under Gu Dingtian's fury, he quickly protected the golden-haired man in the center. He looked at Yi Xian with an extremely sinister and murderous look. If Yi Xian had hurt someone else, Gu Dingtian would not have been so angry. However, who was Michel? He was not only the spokesperson of the Moore Group, but also Sword Saint Sith, who was a close friend of the Heavenly Saber God. Today, Yi Xian had cut off one of Michel's arms at the charity banquet held by Gu Dingtian. This was completely due to his failure to protect Michel. Therefore, Gu Dingtian had an unshirkable responsibility. If the Heavenly Saber God knew about this, he would definitely blame him. He was afraid that he would lose his position as the Deputy Mansion Master. Thinking of this, Gu Dingtian was full of hatred. He looked at Yi Xian with an extremely terrifying murderous look. Yi Xian, how dare you hurt the guest of the martial arts divine mansion? Today either you die or I die. Gu Dingtian's eyes were bloodshot as he roared loudly. Either you die or I die? You lowly ants? Yi Xian strolled over surrounded by a bloody light. A cruel and ferocious smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. His voice echoed in everyone's ears. The martial arts divine mansion is conspiring to rebel and overthrow the Xia country. From now on, anyone who goes against the Martial Security Department will be punished for treason. Anyone who resists will be killed on the spot. When Yi Xian said these words, the 3-foot blood sword flew out of his hand. The terrifying blood sword buzzed and released an extremely terrifying murderous aura. It vaguely covered Gu Dingtian and the others. Kill him. Gu Dingtian was completely mad. When he roared, all the martial artists behind him rushed toward Yixian violently. Since he had found the real body of the masked man, Yixian was no longer interested in entangling with this group of ants. All of you can go to hell. Buzz. The blood sword shone in the sky and killed all of them. Rays of bloody light burst out from the blood sword. Yixian had one hand behind his back. Every time he slashed out, dozens of lives would be taken. Chapter 125. Blood. Fresh blood dyed the whole banquet red. A large number of broken limbs could be seen everywhere, and the air was filled with the strong smell of blood. The living creatures were wailing, and the dead souls were crying. A large number of martial artists were killed by Yixian, which made the businessmen who were watching the massacre scream in horror. Gu Dingtian's face turned pale, and he stared blankly at the scene in front of him. His back was already soaked with cold sweat. No, it's impossible. How can you be so strong? Gu Dingtian said to himself, trembling. At this moment, the blond man's face turned pale. He had never thought that Yixian would be so bold as to kill the people of the martial Dao Divine Prefecture. Wasn't he afraid that the heavenly saber god would seek revenge from him? Horror, fear, and despair were the feelings of the blond man. He tried to calm himself down and stepped back quietly. Apparently, he wanted to escape from this place. Puff! When the last martial artist turned into a cold corpse and fell at the feet of Yixian, the so-called charity banquet was dead silent, and a feeling of extreme fear spread in the air. Bang! Suddenly, a businessman knelt down on the ground and begged in tears, Don't kill me. I'm really not a traitor, spare my life. As if there was a chain effect, these so-called business celebrities knelt down on the ground one by one and kept begging Yixian to spare their lives. There were also a lot of cries and wails. Unfortunately, Yixian didn't even have the interest to look at these famous figures in the business world. Send all of them to the warden's office and interrogate them, Yixian said coldly and asked Tianyu and the others to take the order. They quickly led the members of the martial security department to arrest these business celebrities one by one. At this moment, Gu Dingtian's body was trembling, and the blond man's face was gloomy, because they saw Yixian walking towards them. They knew that they could not escape from Yixian. Yixian, you killed the people of the martial Dao Divine Prefecture today. When the Saber God knows about this, he will not let you go. Gu Dingtian roared fiercely, but if one listened carefully, one would notice that his voice was trembling greatly, which also proved the fear in his heart. Unfortunately, Yixian didn't take Gu Dingtian's threat to heart. In his opinion, the so-called absolute heaven saber god was no different from an ant. Wang! Yixian was cold and emotionless. When his palm swept through the air, a powerful suction force acted on the golden-haired man, instantly pulling him in front of Yixian. Crack! Yixian's jade-like hand grabbed the blond man's neck and lifted him into the air as if he was lifting a chick. His voice was calm as he said, You should have left Xia half a year ago. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance anymore. Tell me where your headquarters are, and I can leave your corpse intact. Haha! The golden-haired man's face turned purple and he found it difficult to breathe. He knew that he would die in the hands of Yixian, but there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, he sneered and said, Yixian, kill me if you can. But let me tell you, this world is not as simple as you think. Someone will avenge me. Haha. Yixian laughed. He really laughed. It was a contemptuous laugh, as if he was watching a clown's performance, but it did not arouse his interest at all. Death is not scary. The real scary thing is to live a life worse than death. I will let you experience this feeling. Yixian's voice was extremely calm, but the golden-haired man's expression changed greatly. He knew that Yixian's means were extremely cruel, and he was afraid that his end would be extremely miserable. Thinking of this situation, the golden-haired man was also a ruthless person. He wanted to kill himself by biting his tongue, so as to avoid being tortured cruelly by Yixian. Crack! But before the golden-haired man could do anything, Yixian sneered and directly dislocated his chin. His voice was vicious as he said, Want to kill yourself? You are really naive. Fatso Huang, break his limbs and bring him back to the Wu and agency for interrogation. Remember, no matter what kind of torture you use, you can't let him die. As Yi Xian threw the golden-haired man to Fatso Huang showed a ferocious smile and quickly left with the golden-haired man. Mr. Yi Xian, what should we do with this man? Tianyu looked at Gu Dingtian coldly, and was asking for Yi Xian's opinion. Break his limbs and put him in the warden's office until the machete god comes to pick him up, Yi Xian coldly said. He turned around and walked towards the outside world. Tianyu and the others laughed sinisterly as they slowly walked towards Gu Dingtian. Gu Dingtian fell to the ground like mud and even pleaded with Yi Xian. Unfortunately, Yi Xian had gone far away. How could he care about Gu Dingtian's pleading? In the endless wilderness, the roars of beasts shook the sky. A figure covered in blood was fleeing in the wilderness. This person had a resolute face, and his cheeks seemed to have been cut by a knife. He held a cold long saber in his hand and was covered by a terrible Gang Qi shield. However, blood kept flowing out of the corners of his mouth, which proved that he had suffered a great injury. Howl! There was a 30-meter-long blood-red wolf that was emitting a terrifying bloody aura. Behind it were tens of thousands of blood-red wolves. The howls of the wolves were deafening in this wilderness. The sky-piercing evil aura rippled in all directions, causing people to feel a sense of terror just by looking at it. Ba Dao, the fifth master in the world 100 years ago, was respected by the world as the heavenly machete god. It was such a revered figure that was currently being chased and intercepted by the blood-red wolves. I can't die. I can't die. The capital. As long as I return to the capital, I will definitely survive the interception of the Xia's technological weapons. Ba Dao trembled and roared. The Gang Qi around him was surging violently. Ba Dao was a very proud person. He was the fifth master in the world 100 years ago. After 100 years, he broke through the primordial realm and stepped into the legendary earth god Immortal realm. His lifespan had reached 300 years, which made it possible for him to pursue the legendary way of immortality. He didn't want to die. He really didn't want to die. However, it was also because of his arrogance and pride that he had been looking for strange beasts to kill. Finally, he encountered a blood-red wolf in the northern prairie. He wanted to kill it to practice his cultivation method. However, when he really fought with the blood-red wolf, an extremely terrible fact was placed in front of him. In just 3 rounds, he was severely injured by the blood-red wolf. If he hadn't forcefully exhausted his blood qi and risked his life to escape from the northern prairie, he would have died in the wolf's mouth. What made Ba Dao feel the most despair was that the blood-red wolf didn't let him go. It even gathered tens of thousands of strange beasts to chase after him. It was also because of Ba Dao's escape that all the towns he passed by were devoured and slaughtered by tens of thousands of blood wolves. This made him feel ashamed, but he was powerless to stop it from happening. Escape. Survive. Ba Dao only had these 2 thoughts in his mind. The capital. The world was in an uproar and it angered the public. When the Martial Dao Heavenly Province was labeled as a traitor and a large number of warriors were arrested by the Martial Security Department, the entire capital was in an uproar. It wasn't just the capital. The news was broadcasted all over the country. Public opinion was incessant on the internet, and it was constantly being spread throughout the country. When all the spearheads were pointed at Yi Xian, all sorts of curses were heard. There was no other reason. The Martial Dao Heavenly Province was founded by the Absolute Heaven Saber God. Furthermore, the Absolute Heaven Saber God had gone to various places to kill strange beasts. He was a person revered by the world. However, the Martial Security Department actually dared to slander the Martial Dao Heavenly Province. How could the world not be angry? Yi Xian? How could a person without any battle achievements or contributions to China be compared to the Absolute Heaven Saber God? On the internet, the news, and various large forums, there were all kinds of comments attacking Yi Xian. This kind of situation couldn't be controlled at all. It also caused Yi Xian to be completely embroiled in a storm of public opinion. Chapter 126. He was the target of public criticism and condemnation. The entire country was condemning Yi Xian. Some people even wrote a petition to the Supreme Court to accuse Yi Xian of abusing his power. Unfortunately, a large number of petitions were ignored. The officials of the Great Xia did not make any statement. However, the matter was spreading and the upper echelons of the Great Xia were at a loss as to how to deal with this matter. When the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace found out that Gu Dingtian had been imprisoned, many martial artists had died at the hands of Yi Xian, and the Martial Security Department had put on the hat of a traitor to the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace. This completely caused the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace to riot and issue a statement to the world. The statement was as follows. The Martial Dao Heavenly Prefecture helped the people of the Great Xia fend off the terrifying beasts, but now the Great Xia is treating them as traitors. From now on, the Martial Dao Heavenly Prefecture will no longer help the people of the Great Xia fend off the attacks of the beasts until the Great Xia gives a reasonable explanation. When this statement was released, it was like adding fuel to the fire, making the world unable to sit still. In this chaotic world, how fragile were the lives of mortals? If the Martial Dao Heavenly Prefecture were to abandon them, it would undoubtedly make things worse for the mortals. This matter also alarmed the major forces of the Great Xia. Even the military of the Great Xia began to condemn Yi Xian. In this storm of public opinion, Yi Xian was reviled by the people of the world and had already aroused public anger. However, the broadcast of the news completely diverted the attention of the world. The news reported, Beishan City was massacred by the beasts, Qingshui Town suffered countless casualties, Great River Village was littered with corpses, and tens of thousands of bloodwolves were killed wherever they went. Tens of thousands of miles of land were filled with bones and corpses, and dark red blood stained the ground. When these photos appeared on the internet, it immediately caused great fear in the world. What was even more frightening was that tens of thousands of bloodwolves were rushing towards the capital city. They would probably arrive in less than 3 days. The entire capital city was under martial law. A large number of fully armed soldiers were patrolling the entire city. The citizens of the capital city were even more anxious. They were secretly praying in their hearts, hoping to survive this disaster. In the dark water prison at the headquarters of the Martial Dao Heavenly Prefecture, Yi Xian was dressed in black and his gray hair was draped behind his head. He leaned lazily on the chair, giving off a drowsy feeling. Yi Xian, kill me if you're a man. In the depths of the water prison, a golden-haired man with disheveled hair was bound by 2 iron chains. Below his knees, he was submerged in a large amount of dirty water. His 4 limbs were broken, and his body was bathed in blood. His twisted and malevolent face was like an evil spirit that had crawled out from hell. It caused people to feel extreme fear when they looked at him. Unfortunately, this scene did not move Yi Xian at all. Instead, he looked at the blonde man indifferently as if he was looking at a clown. Sir, this guy is too stubborn. No matter what kind of torture we used, he would not say a word. Even the latest psychedelic drug could not make him tell us where their headquarters are. Fatso Huang said with an ashamed expression. After all, I've been trained. It's understandable that you couldn't interrogate him. Yi Xian stretched his body lazily. His voice was very calm. Sir, I still have 2 ways to make him talk. Fatso Huang was afraid that Yi Xian would be dissatisfied and hurriedly asked. However, the sinister look on his face was extremely strong. What ways? Yi Xian smiled. The first way, I will create a pit of 10,000 snakes and put all kinds of poisonous snakes in the pit. After giving him the antidote, I will throw him into the pit and let him suffer the pain of being bitten by 10,000 snakes. However, I will definitely not take his life. The second way is actually what this subordinate is best at. Before I followed you, I was a surgeon and was very familiar with the human body. I can imitate the ancient punishment of death by 1,000 cuts. I will wrap a fishing net around this person and cut every hole in the net. Therefore, it is also known as fish scale cutting. I can cut a total of 3,600 times. Even if he has a will made of steel, he will still have to say everything he knows. As Fatso Huang spoke sinisterly, Yi Xian looked deeply at this person. Even he felt a sense of fear when he heard these 2 vicious punishments. I really didn't misjudge you. You are really vicious, Yi Xian said with a strange expression. The conversation between the 2 was naturally heard by the blonde man. This also made his body tremble. He struggled madly in the water prison. His eyes were already wide open. He was clearly frightened by Fatso's sinister methods. Yi Xian, I beg of you, kill me, The blonde man trembled and begged for death. He had never thought that death would be such a happy thing in his life. So you also know fear? Yixian laughed softly. He then turned to look at Fatso Huang and said, "There's no need to go through so much trouble. I'm not so bored as to torture people for fun. Besides, I have my own ways to find out everything I want." Buzz. Suddenly, a bloody light rose from Yixian's body. His eyes spun strangely, causing the blonde man in the depths of the water prison to stare blankly, as if he had lost his soul. Soul-snatching technique. This technique was extremely vicious. Not only could it read the blonde man's memories, but it would also destroy the soul of the person who was read. They wouldn't even have the chance to reincarnate. A large amount of memory fragments surged into Yixian's mind. After a minute, Yixian slowly opened his eyes. He had already understood what kind of power was behind the blonde man. It was also at this time that the blonde man's soul was destroyed. However, he had a peaceful smile on his face. Clearly, this kind of death was a kind of happiness for him. Ta-ta-ta. A series of footsteps came. Tianyu quickly came before Yixian and bowed. "Mr. Yi, someone claims to be an old friend of yours and wishes to see you." "An old friend?" Hearing Tianyu's words, Yixian frowned. He didn't have any old friends in the capital. Other than Qinglong and Xueji, there were only Xia Qingzhu and the Yi family. When did he have any old friends? "Bring me to have a look." Under Tianyu's lead, Yixian slowly walked towards the outside. Wuan Agency meeting room. A graceful woman sat in the room. She wore a red dress that was as dazzling as a ball of flame. This woman's features were picturesque. Her delicate brows gave off a breathtaking feeling. "It's you?" As Yixian walked into the meeting room, when she saw the woman's appearance, she was slightly startled, then returned to normal. "Mr. Yi, it's been a year since we parted in Jiangnan. Wan'er greets you." Gu Wan'er smiled sweetly and bowed to Yixian. Gu Wan'er was the person in charge of Jiangnan's dazzling auction house. Back then, Yixian had purchased jade from this woman. He had even given her a Yun spirit pill to auction. If Gu Wan'er hadn't appeared before him, Yixian might have already forgotten about this woman. Moreover, Yixian didn't think that he had anything to do with this woman. What was Gu Wan'er's purpose in coming to see him? Chapter 127. Gu Wan'er? All of a sudden, a ray of light flashed through Yixian's mind. A trace of understanding flashed through his eyes, as if he'd guessed the purpose of Gu Wan'er's visit. "How are you related to Gu Dingtian?" Yixian asked calmly. Gu Wan'er's face turned bitter. She bit her lips and said, "Gu Dingtian is my father. I came here to ask you to spare my father's life. Save her father." These two simple words revealed her purpose. Yixian smiled contemptuously and said, "Gu Dingtian plotted a rebellion, which is a serious crime. He will be sentenced to death soon. Although you and I have met once, I can't save him." Gu Wan'er's face did not change, as if she had already guessed this result. She hesitated for a while, then showed a charming smile and walked towards Yixian. Her eyes were like limpid autumn water, with a seductive look. "Mr. Yi, who doesn't know that you have the final say in the Wuan department? As long as you say the word, my father will be released from the sea of suffering. As long as you can help me this time, I will be at your disposal." Gu Wan'er's seductive appearance was overflowing, and a hint of redness appeared on her exquisite face. When she lightly spat out her cherry lips, the fragrance of orchids assaulted her face. Her long red dress also fell off at this moment, and her beautiful body, which was carved like ivory, was completely revealed in front of Yixian. Was Gu Wan'er beautiful? She was beautiful, extremely beautiful. She was a kind of seductive beauty. Regardless of her appearance, temperament, or her curvaceous figure, she gave people a feeling that she could steal one's soul. As long as a man saw this scene, he would probably turn into a beast and do something impulsive. Gu Wan'er was very confident in herself. She believed that no man could resist her temptation. Even Yixian was no exception. Yixian's face was very calm. When he opened and closed his eyes, they were as deep as an ancient pool. He looked at Gu Wan'er indifferently, and no one knew what he was thinking. A honey trap? Yixian smiled and stroked Gu Wan'er's rosy cheeks with one hand, which made the woman blush even more. When her cherry lips parted, She moaned shamefully, and her beautiful body trembled slightly, giving people a very ambiguous feeling. Mr. Yi, let Wan'er serve you, okay? Gu Wan'er raised her jade-like arms and wrapped them around Yixian's body. When she closed her eyes slightly, she looked very seductive, as if she was at his mercy, giving people a sense of temptation. Are you a virgin? Suddenly, while Gu Wan'er was waiting for Yixian to pluck her, Gu Yixian's voice was slightly indifferent, which made Gu Wan'er's face slightly changed. She opened her eyes and looked at Yixian. When Gu Wan'er saw the contemptuous smile on Yixian's face, she stopped breathing and became a little flustered. She then forced a smile and said, Mr. Yi, is this important? Gu Wan'er could not be blamed for being flustered. After all, she was not a virgin and had already been with many men. Moreover, she had a great secret. Gu Dingtian could become the deputy palace master of the martial Dao Heavenly Palace, because she had already given herself to the absolute Heaven Blade God. Otherwise, how could Gu Dingtian, a mere grandmaster warrior, be the deputy palace master of the martial Dao Heavenly Palace? Slap! All of a sudden, a resounding slap sounded out. A 5-fingered red mark appeared on Gu Wan'er's face, and her delicate body was sent flying. Blood couldn't stop flowing out from the corner of her mouth, and she was completely stunned. She never thought that Yixian would actually make a move against her. At this moment, Yixian straightened his clothes as an expression of extreme disgust appeared on his face. He coldly looked at Gu Wan'er and said, not to mention that you're a withered flower, even if you're a virgin, do you think you're worthy of me? Yixian smiled contemptuously and walked slowly toward Gu Wan'er. He looked down at her and said in a cold voice, it's easy to save your father. Give me all the Gu family's property, and I will naturally spare his life. Now you can get out of here. After saying that, Yixian turned and walked out of the meeting room. He did not even want to look at Gu Wan'er's beautiful body. Yixian, stop right there. Without waiting for Yixian to leave, Gu Wan'er spoke out in embarrassment and indignation. She didn't care about her naked body and quickly blocked Yixian's path. Gu Wan'er had never been humiliated like this since she was a child. But she never thought that she would be humiliated like this by Yixian today. How could she endure this? Yixian, I'm warning you. The martial Heavenly Palace is already pressuring the Xia Kingdom. If you don't release my father, the martial Heavenly Palace will no longer protect the people of the Xia Kingdom. Moreover, it's not just the martial Heavenly Palace. All the major powers are paying attention to this matter. The military of the Xia Kingdom is also extremely dissatisfied with you. Even if you have someone backing you, the people of the Xia Kingdom are cursing you. You have already become a sinner of the Xia Kingdom. It won't be long before the upper echelons of the Xia Kingdom interfere in this matter, even if you don't release him. Gu Wan'er shouted angrily, her words carrying a great threat. Yixian smiled. He really smiled, but it was an extremely cold smile. Yixian, I can guarantee you that as long as you release my father, the martial Heavenly Palace will definitely let bygones be bygones. Gu Wan'er's tone softened, hoping that Yixian would understand the situation he was in. You're really ignorant. Yixian laughed coldly as a killing intent flashed through his eyes. When Gu Wan'er saw Yixian's smile, her face changed. A feeling of impending doom surged towards her, and she could not help but take a step back. What are you doing? Gu Wan'er asked in a trembling voice. Buzz. Taking a step forward, the air exploded. Under Gu Wan'er's horrified gaze, Yixian's face was cold as he gripped her neck with one hand and lifted her into the air. Crack. Tightening his fingers, he broke her neck. This was Yixian's method. Gu Wan'er's eyes lost focus as large amounts of blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. To think that she would die from having her neck broken by Yixian. Bang! Yixian threw the woman's body on the ground as if he was throwing away garbage. He said in a cold voice, I hate it when people threaten me. You can die now. Fatso Huang. Yes, my lord. Fatso Huang quietly appeared behind Yixian, waiting for Yixian's orders. Throw this woman out and kill Gu Dingtian for me. Let the father and daughter go to hell together. Also, tell Chanyu to use the name of the Martial Security Department to announce to the public that anyone who befriends the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace is going against me, Yixian, and will be punished for treason. As for the Gu family, it's time for your death god guards to do something. Go and wipe them out. Remember, don't leave anyone alive. Yes, sir. Fatso Huang smiled grimly and took the order. Looking at Fatso Huang's back, Yi Xian murmured coldly, "If I don't teach you a lesson, it seems that you really think that I, Yi Xian, am easy to bully." Chapter 128. No one could go against Yi Xian's will. This had already become the consensus of the Martial Security Bureau. According to Yi Xian's instructions, the Martial Security Bureau released a statement to the public. However, the statement was not as straightforward as Yi Xian's. It was clearly more tactful, but the content made the world angry and helpless. The Martial Dao Heavenly Palace was convicted of treason. Anyone who colluded with them would be punished for treason. As for the Gu family, they were all imprisoned in the prison and would be sentenced at a later date. Yi Xian's domineering will directly appeared on all the major forums and networks. However, because of the attack of the Blood Wolf beast, this matter was quickly ignored by the world. At this moment, the eyes of the world were focused on these terrifying beasts. A waning moon hung in the sky. In the capital, in a remote courtyard house, when night fell, a big shot of Xia Kingdom, accompanied by guards, quietly entered this courtyard house. After an entire night, when the sun rose from the east, this big shot walked out of the courtyard house. In the courtyard, Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. A breeze blew, causing his hair to flutter in the wind. Yi Xian's eyes drifted as if he was deep in thought. No one knew what he was thinking. "Sir, you have to consider this matter carefully," Fatso Huang reminded in a low voice. "Fatso Huang, do you know why no matter what I do, I can obtain the support of the upper echelons of China?" Yi Xian said softly. "This?" Fatso Huang didn't know how to answer Yi Xian's question. In fact, he also had a lot of questions in his heart. Yi Xian was only a guest elder, but why did the upper echelons of China stand firmly on his side in the matter of the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace? This subordinate is slow-witted. "Sir, please enlighten me," Fatso Huang said respectfully. "Because in the eyes of the upper echelons of China, I, Yi Xian, am the only person who can protect China," Yi Xian said with a self-deprecating smile. "Ah." Upon receiving this answer, Fatso Huang cried out in surprise. He looked at Yi Xian with a strange look in his eyes. This was because he did not understand what ability his master had to make the upper echelons of China think so highly of him. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't explain too much. He didn't want to tell Fatso Huang that he was actually a cultivator, and a crossing calamity stage cultivator at that. There was no need for him to know about this. "Sir, you have to understand that there are over 10,000 exotic beasts attacking this time. There has never been such a huge beast tide in the world. If something happens to you, then—" Fatso Huang wanted to say something but stopped himself. However, the worry on his face was obvious. "Ha! Exotic beasts." Yi Xian's eyes flickered as the blood-colored memories replayed in his mind. Those 4 years of blood-soaked fighting, of struggling between life and death. No one knew what he had experienced, but the number of exotic beasts that had died at his hands numbered in the tens of millions. 3 days later, in the suburbs of Jingdu, heavy tanks were lined up in a row. A large number of high-tech weapons were laid across the ground. The black mass of soldiers was endless. Every one of them was fully armed and held heavy machine guns in their hands. They stood there quietly with their weapons resting on their backs. It wasn't just these soldiers. A large number of ancient martial ability users were holding weapons and releasing a sharp aura around them. They were all waiting for the Blood Wolf tide to attack. Jingdu TV station. This is Jingdu TV station. The scene we are seeing now is the northern suburbs of Jingdu. According to the satellite radar, in half an hour, these terrifying beasts will invade Jingdu. This is Qingning TV station. Our soldiers of China are united. We will definitely survive this disaster. The hosts of the major TV stations were nervously reporting the news. Under the cameras of the major TV stations, the scene of the suburbs of Jingdu appeared in the eyes of the people of China. At this moment, some of the people of China were gathered in front of the TV, while others were watching the live broadcast on the internet. However, without exception, everyone was secretly praying that this beast tide would pass safely. In a southern city, in an ordinary person's house. Look. What did I say? The martial Dao heavenly abode really didn't send anyone to resist this beast tide. A middle-aged bald man stared at the scene on the TV. His voice was extremely irritable. "Hubby, forget it. Even without the martial Dao heavenly abode, our soldiers will definitely be able to destroy these beasts." His wife gently consoled him. "Stupid. What is a woman like you know? If the absolute heaven blade god can lead the martial Dao heavenly abode to resist this beast tide, it will increase our chances of winning. It's all that despicable Yi Xian's fault. If he hadn't slandered the martial Dao heavenly abode, this wouldn't have happened." The middle-aged bald man cursed, appearing extremely angry. In a slightly cold bar in a northern city, more than 10 young men and women were drinking, but their eyes were all focused on the TV. "That damned Yi Xian. Whether or not Jingdu can survive this beast tide, I will definitely condemn him on the internet. That's right. Look, where's this bastard in this group of warriors? This Yi Xian is an existence that brings disaster to the country and the people. When I return to school, I will definitely gather all of our classmates and write a letter to the Supreme Court to accuse him of abusing his authority." These scenes continued to happen in every city. The curses and resentment of the citizens of China also rang out everywhere. Yi Xian's image had been completely positioned as an existence that brought disaster to the country and the people. Capital, northern suburbs. Although it was summer, neither the soldiers of China nor the ancient martial arts ability users felt the slightest bit of heat. This was because they knew that they were about to face cruel beasts. In a while they would face a life-and-death battle. Oh! The howl of a wolf shook the earth. A cloud of blood rose from the distant horizon. The terrifying howl of the wolf and the bloody light that soared into the sky were like a blood-colored meteor that wanted to destroy this world. Warriors of China. A middle-aged general with a dignified and solemn expression streaked across the sky with a military knife, emitting a cold light. "Behind you are the citizens of China. They are not only our family, but also the people we need to protect. If the country is destroyed, the family will be destroyed. If the family is destroyed, the people will no longer be around. Fight for survival, fight for the people of China." The middle-aged general roared hot-bloodedly. "Fight for survival, fight for the people of China." The mountains roared and the seas roared. The world was filled with killing intent. Endless roars echoed in all directions. It was also at this moment that the tanks on the ground aimed their cannons forward. Groups of bombers soared in the sky, ready to fire the missiles under their wings at any time. A large number of high-tech weapons were also activated at this moment. The black mass of soldiers held heavy machine guns and were already pressing the triggers. A large number of ancient martial arts ability users released their sharp auras, ready to fight the beast tide at any time. "Get ready." The middle-aged general raised his military knife. When his military knife fell, it was time to fire at the tens of thousands of blood wolves. Chapter 129. Wait. What's that? Is that a person? Saber god? At this critical moment, the battle was about to begin. However, many ancient martial artists cried out in alarm. The middle-aged general was stunned as he looked ahead. A person was running in a sorry state, his entire body bathed in blood. The aura around his body was extremely weak, as if it would shatter at any moment. Behind this person, tens of thousands of blood wolves were howling and roaring, madly chasing after him. "I'm the absolute saber god. Don't fire." Ba Dao's face was pale as he roared. When he saw the tens of thousands of soldiers in front of him, joy appeared in his eyes. He quickly ran toward them. "Don't fire. He's really saber god." A martial artist shouted. "No, if we don't fire now, we'll all die when the beast horde gets closer," a major general refuted. His face was extremely pale. "But saber god is right in front of us. If we fire now, he'll die too," a martial artist argued. He was extremely stupid and did not understand the seriousness of the situation. "General, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and fire. Do you want to wait until the beast horde destroys capital city?" The major general roared. It was no wonder that the major general was so anxious. The only thing they could use to fight against the exotic beasts was their high-tech weapons. If they waited for tens of thousands of blood wolves to get closer, It would be too late to activate them. These high-tech weapons were all long-range attacks. If they exploded at close range, they would be able to deal heavy damage to the beast horde. However, they would also die under the high-tech weapons. All troops, listen up. The middle-aged general had already seen the seriousness of the situation. He had no choice but to sacrifice Ba Dao. This was the best choice. How dare you? All of a sudden, several tens of cultivators stepped out from the crowd and stood in front of the various high-tech weapons. This caused the middle-aged general's countenance to change, and his entire body trembled in anger. You idiots! The middle-aged general roared angrily. Ignore them and open fire. What a pity! The opportunity was fleeting. After a short delay, the beast horde was less than a kilometer away from capital city. It was also at this moment that Ba Dao crossed the sky and finally arrived at the human camp. General, the range is too short. We can't fire. Reporting to the general, the A-02 annihilation missile cannot be launched. If it is launched now, you will also be in the center of the explosion. A large number of reports came in, causing the middle-aged general's face to turn ashen. He glared hatefully at Ba Dao, but he didn't have the time to pay attention to him. Activate the second emergency plan. As the middle-aged general roared, the tens of thousands of soldiers turned pale, but they still held their heavy machine guns and aimed at the beast tide that was charging toward them. However, their backs were already drenched in cold sweat. Fire! Da-da-da! Flames and smoke filled the sky. When the tens of thousands of soldiers pulled the triggers, the black muzzles shot out tens of thousands of tongues of fire. The terrifying power seemed to want to tear the sky apart. Roar! The blood wolf howled into the sky. Vicious energy rushed into the heavens. An extremely terrifying scene appeared. The blood-red heavenly wolf's body, which was 100 feet tall, swelled up at a terrifying speed. It only stopped when it was 1,000 feet tall. The blood-red light on its body covered the sky, and when it roared at the sky, an incredibly terrifying energy gushed out of its mouth. Rumble! The blood-red light filled the sky and the ground shook. Tens of thousands of tongues of fire were turned into ashes under the roar of the blood-red heavenly wolf. However, this wasn't the end. The terrifying energy destroyed everything in its path, instantly turning the tanks on the ground into scrap metal. The remaining energy shockwaves caused tens of thousands of soldiers to fall to the ground. Roar! The 100-foot-tall heavenly wolf flew across the sky. The blood-red light around its body rippled as it roared at the sky. Its terrifying power filled the sky and earth, causing people to feel extremely terrified. Who could resist its monstrous power? Who dared to resist it? At this moment, the hosts of the major television stations screamed. Many cameras shook violently, but they still broadcast the scene in front of them. This allowed the people of the Xia Kingdom to watch this terrifying scene through their televisions. Roar! Tens of thousands of blood wolves rushed over. In the blink of an eye, they had already arrived in front of the tens of thousands of soldiers. The ferocious beast's eyes were filled with blood, and its terrifying claws seemed to want to tear apart all the humans in front of it. Kill! The middle-aged general's eyes were filled with despair. However, he still held the military knife in his hand and led the soldiers behind him to fight against the blood wolves. Under his lead, the soldiers of the Xia Kingdom knew that there was no way out. They could only fight with their backs against the wall because behind them were all the people of the capital city. Roar! Da-da-da! The howls of the wolves and the sounds of gunfire were completely intertwined at this moment. The vast land was scorched earth. Blood splattered everywhere, and miserable howls could be heard. The terrifying howls of the wolves were cruel and ferocious. One by one, the soldiers fell into a pool of blood and gradually turned into cold corpses. They continued to fight against the strange beasts, but they were only mortals. How could they be a match for the blood wolves? Suddenly, a large number of cries came from the capital city. Thousands of people were rushing towards the battlefield. The sorrowful cries came from their mouths. This was because among the soldiers fighting on the battlefield, some were their fathers, some were their children, and some were their loved ones. On the battlefield, an ordinary soldier, about 18 or 19 years old. His face was still young and immature. He looked like a teenager. His ribs were broken and he crawled in a pool of blood with great difficulty. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth uncontrollably. It was obvious that he had suffered unimaginable injuries in this battle with the strange beasts. "My son." There was a woman with white hair and tears on her wrinkled face. She did not care about the slaughter on the battlefield at all. She staggered towards the young man until she reached him and hugged him tightly in her arms. Tears flowed out of her eyes uncontrollably. Roar! A blood wolf howled ferociously. Its blood-red eyes shone with a light that seemed to choose a person to devour. It was approaching the mother and son with a low growl. "Mom, hurry up and leave." The teenager trembled as large amounts of blood flowed from his mouth. He looked at his mother with teary eyes. His trembling arms constantly supported himself on the ground as he tried to stand up. Crack! The sound of bones cracking came from the teenager's broken arms. In the end, he could not stand up and fell into his mother's arms. I can't die. I have to protect my family." The teenager trembled as he growled. He gripped a military knife tightly in his hand and protected his mother behind him. However, his eyes were filled with despair. Roar! The blood wolf soared into the air. Its sharp claws emitted the light of death, as if it would tear the teenager apart in the next moment. The teenager's eyes were mournful. He raised the military knife in his hand and was ready to fight to the death. All of a sudden, at this critical moment, a benevolent figure blocked in front of him. A terrifying sharp claw pierced through the person's chest. Blood spurted out and dyed the youth's face blood-red. It was a tragic sight. Drip, drip, drip. Blood kept dripping from the teenager's face to the ground. He stared blankly at his mother's body that had collapsed in front of him. It was as if she had lost her soul. The woman's body was cold, but her face was filled with serenity after death. Looking at this scene, the teenager's military knife fell to the ground. A line of blood tears slowly flowed from his eyes. His eyes drifted and blurry memories of the past kept flashing in his mind. Chapter 130. When he was 10 years old. Lin Air, you have to remember that when you grow up, you have to protect your country and be a man of indomitable spirit. Mom, you're really annoying. How many times have you told me that I'm going out to play? When he was 18 years old, in front of the train station, he was wearing a military uniform with a red flower on his chest. Lin Air, from today onwards you will enter the army. No matter what difficulties you encounter in the future, you have to remember that a soldier's duty is to protect your country. His mother, whose hair was white, was earnestly teaching him in front of the train station. All right, don't nag anymore. I'm leaving now. The young man waved his hand and stepped on the train to the military camp. As the train rumbled and started, the young man officially became a soldier and left his hometown and his mother's side. The young man's thoughts turned. His eyes were already blurred by tears. He looked at his mother's cold body and said, "Mom, your son has never let you down. Even if I bleed to the last drop of my blood, I will be a hero to protect my country. You can rest in peace in the underworld." Kill. The young man's broken body exploded with amazing willpower. He picked up the military knife on the ground and rushed towards the blood wolf with a crazy face. Ower. The young man's action completely enraged the blood wolf, and it directly pounced on him. The young man didn't try to dodge. He knew that he couldn't dodge, but the crazed look in his eyes was enough to shock anyone who looked at him. Puff! The blood wolf's claws pierced through the young man's chest. However, the young man did not feel any pain. The military knife in his hand stabbed towards the blood wolf's heart as if he had gone crazy, causing the blood wolf to let out a shrill howl. After a full 10 breaths of time, the blood wolf's heart was destroyed and it finally died under the young man's knife. The young man's cold body fell to the ground. However, his face was extremely peaceful after death. It was as if he was telling the world that he had fulfilled his promise to his mother, and was a true hero. Such a scene was constantly playing out in various places. Dad! A middle-aged soldier died tragically in the mouth of the blood wolf. In the distance, a young girl cried loudly. Her cries were so loud that it made people feel as if their liver and intestines were about to break. Husband! There was a young soldier who had just gotten married. His wife's eyes were filled with tears as she hugged his cold body tightly. She was also buried in the wolf's mouth. Blood wolves howled to the sky, and humans cried out in grief. This was a war between humans and exotic beasts. It was a merciless slaughter that humans were unable to withstand at all. Blood dyed the ground red, and the ice-cold corpse was a ghastly sight. When these scenes were broadcast live on television to the citizens of Xia country, they cried in front of their televisions. There was only despair in their eyes. On the battlefield, the middle-aged general was bathed in blood. He was protected by a large number of soldiers, but the endless blood wolves had already surrounded them. He turned around and stared at the retreating ancient martial ability users as he roared, "You damned bastards, do you want to be deserters?" With Ba Dao in the lead, shame appeared on everyone's faces. However, they knew that even if they went forward, they wouldn't be a match for these terrifying exotic beasts. Just the Wolf King alone was staring at them, and could possibly annihilate them at any moment. At this moment, through the live broadcast, the citizens of Xia country were all watching this scene. When they saw the absolute Heavenblade god that they revered continuously retreating, an earth-shattering wave of curses rang out across Xia country. What absolute Heavenblade god? He's a bastard. This beast horde was obviously attracted by that bastard Ba Dao. He has to take full responsibility. It's useless to scold him now. These exotic beasts are too terrifying. Let's just pray that the citizens of Jingdu can escape this calamity. The entire Xia country was in chaos at this moment. Cries of grief could be heard from all over the country. On the battlefield, the middle-aged general's eyes were mournful, and there was a hint of madness in them. He suddenly roared at the soldiers beside him, "Soldiers, are you afraid of death?" "No." A large number of soldiers roared mournfully. They had already guessed what the middle-aged general was going to do. "Haha, good. As expected of my soldiers. Today, I'll let these ancient martial ability users die with us. It can be considered as protecting the citizens of Jingdu." The middle-aged general laughed maniacally. He picked up the communication device in his hand and issued a crazy order. Launch the A-02 annihilation missile for Lao Tzu. A number of armed aircraft instantly received this order. This caused the pilots to tremble as they replied, "General, if you do this, you will die too." A soldier's duty is to obey orders. You only need to carry out orders. The middle-aged general roared loudly. This caused the pilots to look pained. However, they knew that this was the only way to eliminate the beast horde. Launch the A-02 annihilation missile. A red button protruded from the cockpit. However, before the pilots could press the red button, a terrifying blood-red light streaked across the sky. A number of armed aircraft instantly exploded into balls of fire. A large number of aircraft wreckage fell to the ground. Over. The blood-red sky wolf's 100-foot-long beast body stretched across the void. A terrifying blood-red light bloomed around its body. When its eyes opened and closed, a cruel and violent look flashed across them. "Foolish humans. Today all of you will become my food." The void shook and the heavens and earth echoed. When the blood-red sky wolf spoke in human language, the world quietly quieted down. No one would have thought that this blood-red sky wolf would have spiritual intelligence that was not inferior to a human's. Everything was quiet. The heavens and earth were silent. Despair spread. The people were panicking because they had discovered an extremely terrifying thing. Since the blood-red sky wolf could speak in human language, it obviously had intelligence that was not inferior to a human's. Based on this, did the beasts that wreaked havoc all over the world also have their own spiritual intelligence? When humans were no longer the leader of all creatures and the beasts had intelligence, where would the future of humans lie? Boys, enjoy this blood-red feast to your heart's content. The blood-red sky wolf howled at the sky. The blood-red light around its body covered the sky and earth. The tens of thousands of blood-red wolves howled in excitement. They rushed towards the humans in front of them with bloodthirsty eyes. Dong! 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 Suddenly, like the beating of the war drums of slaughter, like the 9 heavens and the rivers of stars in reverse, the wind and clouds in this area changed, and it actually gradually dimmed. An extremely oppressive atmosphere spread in all directions, and the white clouds in the sky turned the color of blood, and there was even more terrifying lightning wreaking havoc in the blood clouds. Rumble! The blood-red lightning streaked across the sky. The terrifying sound of thunder seemed to make the world tremble. Above the capital city, Tongtian's blood-red light soared into the sky. A figure stepped on the sky. His gray hair fluttered in the wind. His black ancient robe rustled. With every step he took, the void beneath his feet trembled. Terrifying ripples spread in all directions. It made people feel a great sense of awe when they looked at him. Like a divine king descending to the mortal world, like a god of the underworld descending. Yi Xian's face was expressionless. He stood proudly between the heavens and earth. However, when he opened and closed his eyes, there was only a ruthless and indifferent look. At the same time, when this scene was broadcast live on television to the people of the Xia Kingdom, it made them speechless. They widened their eyes and did not dare to look away. Chapter 131. Who is he? Yi Xian. He's Yi Xian. I've seen his photo on a forum before. Everyone was in an uproar. Everyone had a complicated look on their faces. They had never expected that Yi Xian, whom they had cursed for days, would appear at such a critical moment when the heavenly blade god was retreating. On the battlefield, tens of thousands of blood-red wolves stopped in their tracks. Their bodies were trembling. At that moment, all of them were prostrating on the ground as if they had seen an extremely terrifying existence. In the void, the blood-red wolf's pupils constricted. It stared at the figure in the distant sky. The terrifying, ferocious aura around it was faintly showing signs of dissipating. Lord Heavenly Sovereign? The blood-red wolf growled. However, its language was not human language. It was a language unique to the Blood Sea battlefield. Other than Yi Xian, no one else could understand it. Then, a scene that shocked the world appeared. The ferocious beast horde was slowly retreating. The blood-red wolf was trembling in the void. Its thick limbs were trembling uncontrollably. When this scene appeared in front of everyone, an extremely strange atmosphere spread throughout the Xia Kingdom. Anyone who was not an idiot could see that the blood-red wolf and the beast horde were clearly afraid of Yi Xian. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, the people of the Xia Kingdom would not have believed it. Greetings, Lord Heavenly Sovereign. The blood-red wolf knew that it could not escape. It also deeply understood how terrifying the person it was facing was. The undying Heavenly Sovereign was the supreme figure in the Blood Sea. More than 10 million creatures had died in his hands. The blood-red wolf was only an extremely weak existence in the Blood Sea battlefield. How could it dare to resist such a terrifying existence? Tens of thousands of blood wolves prostrated themselves on the ground. When this scene appeared in the eyes of the world, it immediately caused a huge uproar. How is this possible? Ba Dao exclaimed in shock. He's Mr. Yi? The middle-aged general said excitedly. At this moment, Yi Xian stood in the void. He looked indifferently at the blood-red wolf in front of him. An extremely obscure language came out of his mouth. How do you want to die? Emotionless six desires, heartless heaven and earth. This was the attitude of the undying Heavenly Lord. It also made the blood-colored heavenly wolf tremble slightly. It said, Heavenly Lord, please spare my life. I was only leading my men to hide in the northern prairie. It was a human who disturbed our peace, so I chased him for 10,000 miles until here. Obviously, the blood-red wolf was talking about Ba Dao. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't give the blood-red wolf a chance to explain. His eyes were cold and emotionless. Since you're here, there's no need for you to leave. I can use the blood qi in your bodies to strengthen my cultivation. When Yi Xian's voice fell, the blood-red wolf's breath froze. Others might not know Yi Xian's temperament, but it was a creature from the Blood Sea battlefield. How could it not know about Yi Xian's terrifying methods? Roar! The heavenly wolf's aura changed drastically. Surging blood light covered its entire body as it roared toward the sky. At this point, even if it begged for mercy, it would be useless. This caused a tyrannical intent to rise in its heart. Flee! Yes, flee! Although the blood-red wolf was a mutated beast, it didn't lack the intelligence of a human. It knew that it was no match for Yi Xian, so why would it risk its life to fight Yi Xian? The void trembled and the air exploded. The blood-red wolf stepped on the void and turned into a streak of blood light, fleeing into the distance in a sorry state. It didn't even look at its subordinates. Do you think you can escape? A cruel smile appeared on Yi Xian's face. His sword fingers streaked across the sky, and a terrifying blood light condensed in the void. A 300-meter-long blood-red celestial sword formed in the sky. Slash! It was like a thunderclap from the 9 heavens. When Yixian's sword fingers streaked across the void, the blood-red celestial sword shot out. It seemed to break through the barrier of space and suddenly appeared above the blood-red wolf's head. Rumble! The celestial sword fell and killed everything. The terrifying blood-red celestial sword instantly cut the blood-red wolf in two. However, it wasn't over yet. Under the horrified gazes of the people, the blood-red celestial sword turned into sword chi that filled the sky and directly shredded the blood-red wolf into a large amount of blood mist. It was also at this moment that Yixian seemed to have turned into a blood-red vortex and devoured all the blood mist. Rumble! The blood-red light was misty and covered the sky. An extremely terrifying fluctuation rose around Yixian. His face alternated between red and pale. It was obvious that he was refining the majestic blood chi in his body. Huff! Yixian spat out a mouthful of turbid air, and there was an explosion in the void. How I missed this feeling. Yixian stretched out his arms and had an intoxicated look on his face. It was obvious that devouring the blood chi was extremely beneficial to his cultivation. It's not Yixian's habit to waste food that's delivered to my doorstep, Yixian muttered to himself. There was a hint of cruelty in his eyes as he looked at the blood-red wolf. Rumble! Yixian struck out with his palm and sword chi that filled the sky rained down as if it was raining cats and dogs. It showed the world what a true expert was like. Roar! Tens of thousands of blood-red wolves fled in all directions. They were howling miserably and no longer had the ferocity they had when they slaughtered humans. Under the merciless rain of blood, their bodies were pierced and turned into a large amount of blood chi that was absorbed by Yixian's body to increase his cultivation. Everything was silent and the world was silent. After an unknown amount of time, perhaps a minute or perhaps an hour, when there were no longer any traces of the blood wolves on the ground, the surviving soldiers gradually woke up and let out cheers of joy. Below the sky in the void, Yixian stepped down from the sky, causing the survivors to be in awe. As for the citizens of Xia who were watching the disaster live on television, they were even more emotional and did not know what to say. Yixian, since your cultivation is so high, why didn't you appear earlier and eliminate all these strange beasts? Instead, you let so many of our soldiers die in vain? Suddenly, an angry roar was heard. Ba Dao's face was flushed red as he questioned Yixian loudly. When Ba Dao said such harsh words, the survivors were stunned. Although they looked down on Ba Dao, what he said was the truth. At this moment, Yixian's face was cold and he had no intention of explaining. He only looked around indifferently and said in a calm voice, "This is a catastrophe for mankind. Whether you can survive it or not depends on you. Remember, I can help you once, but I might not be able to help you a second time." After saying this, Yixian's eyes narrowed as he directly looked at Ba Dao. This caused Ba Dao's expression to change, and all the hair on his body stood on end. His feet unconsciously retreated. What are you doing? Buzz! Before Ba Dao could react, Yixian waved his hand and instantly sucked Ba Dao in front of him. You little ant, how dare you be so presumptuous in front of me? Yixian said eerily. Die! Bang! Before Ba Dao's horrified eyes, a blood-red light enveloped him. The absolute Skyblade God did not even have time to scream before he exploded into a bloody mist. He no longer existed in this world. Good death! Someone clapped and cheered. Following that, a large number of voices echoed. Suddenly, before the soldiers could express their gratitude to Yixian's calm face suddenly turned cold. His eyebrows were tightly knitted together. Then he looked eerily into the depths of the sky. When he took a step forward, he mysteriously disappeared from everyone's sight. Chapter 132. The world was in an uproar as discussions broke out. The beast tide had touched everyone's hearts. The soldiers who survived the battle could return home, and the dead would be listed as heroes for future generations to remember. The Supreme Court of the State of Xia determined that the Martial Dao Heavenly Sanctum was guilty of treason. Their leader, Ba Dao, had been executed, and the rest of the Martial Dao Heavenly Sanctum were all punished for treason. In an instant, the Martial Dao Heavenly Sanctum was cursed by everyone. Their branches across the country were closed down by the Hanging Mirror Department, and a large number of warriors left the martial Dao Heavenly Sanctum. The 7 deputy sanctum heads seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth. A transcendent power that had just risen had disappeared under the thunderous blow of the state of Xia. This also sounded the alarm for many other transcendent powers in the state of Xia. And this was not the end. The warriors and ability users who had retreated from the Beast Tide were all captured by the Martial Security Department and sentenced to death. When everything was over and the state of Xia was slightly more peaceful, everyone's attention was focused on one person. Yixian. It was a simple name, but it was well known by everyone. Without his appearance, perhaps the entire population of the capital would have been massacred by the Beast Tide. The public's opinion changed. The curses directed at Yixian turned into guilt. All the major forums on the internet and major television news channels issued apologies to Yixian. All the major ancient martial arts clans and transcendent powers stepped through the doors of the Yi family, wanting to invite Yixian to attend some events. They even lowered their statuses to the extreme. However, while they were searching for Yixian seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth, never appearing in front of the world again. The Martial Security Department, the Hanging Mirror Department, and the state of Xia's military were not the only forces looking for Yixian. Jixia College, the Monster Exterminating League, even the overseas forces were investigating Yixian's whereabouts. However, to their disappointment, after 3 months, Yixian did not appear in the eyes of the world. The sky was high, the clouds were light, and the wind was howling. A streak of light tore through the clouds. The terrifying shockwave exploded, but it did not affect Yixian at all. His eyes were gloomy and cold, and his face alternated between red and pale. He was shooting towards the south at an unimaginable speed. Rumble! Thunder rumbled while the might of the heavens and the earth pressed down. In the depths of the vast sky, a strand of azure blue lightning was faintly discernible, and it seemed to be chasing after Yixian's figure without dispersing from the beginning until now. Heavenly thunder tribulation. For simple words, but they carried an extremely terrifying meaning. When Yixian devoured the qi and blood of tens of thousands of blood fiends and consolidated his cultivation at the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage, this was originally a trivial matter. However, under the throbbing of his heart, a sense of restlessness appeared in his heart. Yixian knew that his lightning tribulation had arrived. This was also the reason why he had left the capital so quickly. The crossing calamity stage, as the name implied, was a tribulation for immortal cultivators. In this stage there were a total of 2 lightning tribulations. The first one was the human tribulation, which was the process of transforming a human into an immortal. Stepping into the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage would lead to the human tribulation. If one could pass it, one would become a half-immortal. If not, one would die and not even have the chance to be reincarnated. As for the later immortal tribulation, it was even more terrifying. It was the process of transforming a mortal into an immortal. Yixian was originally at the early stage of the crossing calamity stage. After refining the 6 Tao principles in Yama Hell, he stepped into the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage. The so-called human tribulation was about to arrive, and Yixian was well aware of it. After devouring the qi and blood of the blood fiends, he stabilized his cultivation at the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage. This also made the heavens and the earth feel it and sent the first tribulation to him. Yixian was not afraid of the so-called human tribulation. With his mastery of the forbidden chapter of the immortal scripture, the so-called human tribulation was just a trivial matter in his eyes. What really worried Yixian was the inner demon tribulation. If the inner demon tribulation attacked him while he was fighting against the human tribulation, he would suffer an extremely cruel test. It was easy to pass the immortal tribulation, but it was difficult to escape from the human heart. These simple words were as heavy as a mountain. It also explained the rugged road of immortal cultivators. Immortal cultivators cultivated their fate and went against the heavens. They understood the heart of the heavens and the Tao of the heavens and the earth. They were not tainted by the mortal world and rarely touched by killing. This did not mean that they had no desires, but they were afraid of being tainted by the karma of killing and attracting the inner demon tribulation. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the inner demon tribulation was. As for Yixian's cultivation, It was obtained from devouring blood energy. It was unknown how many creatures had died in his hands, but his hands were already covered in blood. His body was filled with a vicious aura, and the resentment that those creatures emitted before they died continued to coil around his body. Yixian could be said to be a devil cultivator. Since ancient times, devil cultivators did not have a good ending. Most of them died in the inner demon tribulation. The boundless mountains were continuous and undulating. This was a desolate and uninhabited place. It was a primeval forest that had not been developed by humans. The vast vegetation was lush, and the sound of birds chirping and beasts roaring could be heard from time to time. It gave people a sense of horror. Under the sky and the void, Yixian's expression changed. He knew that he could not go any further. The thunder calamity in the sky had locked onto him, and the boundless mountains below were undoubtedly the best place for him to cross the calamity. He turned into a stream of light and swooped down. Yixian's expression was solemn, and there was a trace of madness in his eyes. He sat cross-legged on the mountain peak, and his body was steaming with extreme bloody light. With him as the center, an extremely terrifying aura shot out in all directions. Rumble! The mountains shook, and the world exploded. When Yixian completely revealed his cultivation of the tribulation stage, the boundless sky gradually darkened, completely covering the boundless mountains. In the thick black clouds there were thousands of thunderbolts raging. The calamity is coming. Like the thunder from the ninth heaven, like the waves of the vast sea, when Yixian spoke, the wind and clouds in the sky changed. The 9-colored thundercloud shone brilliantly and floated in the sky. Crack! A bloody thunderbolt streaked across the sky, illuminating the world. With an unimaginable power, it struck toward Yixian. Heartbroken Mountain Blood Sea Battlefield. Yuanling had his hands behind his back. His eyes were deep, as if he was looking into the distance through the Blood Sea battlefield. The strange black fog around him was fluctuating. No one knew what he was thinking. He is crossing the calamity. The Blood Sea overturned the sky, and the shadow took shape. A blood-colored shadow quietly appeared behind Yuanling. It is easy to cross the calamity of man, but it is difficult to escape from the inner demon. He reached the tribulation stage in 4 years, which is a heaven-defying feat. It is extremely difficult to cross this calamity, Yuanling said deeply. The heaven-destroying halberd has recognized him as its master, and he has the incomplete 6 Tao rules in his body. Can't he cross the inner demon calamity? The bloody shadow asked. The inner demon calamity has nothing to do with cultivation. It is an interrogation of one's soul. If he really has no desires and no emotions, he can cross this calamity. But you have to know, since the beginning of the world, who dares to say that they have no desires and no emotions? Even those who have become immortals in the earth immortal world dare not say that. Yuanling sighed. Chapter 133. Then, if he can't pass this tribulation, then you and I... The blood-red shadow said in horror. Don't worry, I have always been patient with him because the heaven-destroying halberd has recognized him as its master. Even if he can't pass this tribulation, with the heaven-destroying halberd by his side, it will definitely ensure that he doesn't die. If he fails to pass the tribulation and becomes a killing machine, it will save us a lot of planning and can also speed up our plan, Yuanling smiled. Listening to Yuanling's explanation, the blood-red shadow said, Yuanling, I have always felt uneasy about this boy. You should know that the heaven-destroying halberd is an ancient killing weapon. Since the creation of the world, it has only recognized one master. This boy is the second master, and he has even refined the 6 Tao precepts. Are you not afraid? Enough. When did you become so paranoid? Yuanling's aura was stifled, and then he said coldly, You should know that you and I are supreme figures who survived the ancient war. Our hands are stained with the blood of countless gods and Buddhas. He's only a tiny mortal. How can he defeat you and me? Yuanling, it is better to be safe than sorry. When the heaven-destroying halberd recognized him as its master, I felt that things were out of our control. You should know that there is an important scripture in the Immortal scripture. Although I don't know if this is true or not, but what if? The blood-red shadow stopped talking and his aura fluctuated. Impossible. The origin spirit's aura surged as it roared in a low voice. I've studied the undying immortal scripture for several tens of thousands of years, and there's no such scripture at all. Moreover, he's only a mortal. Could it be that his aptitude and comprehension are stronger than mine? Yuan Ling constantly forced himself to calm down, and his aura also gradually calmed down. Then he said with slight fear, "But you're right. It's better to be safe than sorry. It seems that we also have to make backup plans." In the vast mountains, the earth was collapsing. The 9-colored thunderclouds were turbulent in the sky and endless lightning struck down. The mountains were collapsing and the trees were turning into ashes. On the top of the mountain, a ball of blazing bloodlight was floating in the void and was constantly being bombarded by the lightning. Painful, very painful, very painful. This kind of pain didn't only affect Yi Xian's body, but also his soul. This was because this heavenly lightning tribulation wasn't a simple lightning tribulation. It contained the power of the heavens, and every time it struck, it would cause Yi Xian extreme pain. However, Yi Xian's cultivation was extremely profound. He wasn't afraid of this heavenly tribulation because he knew that this so-called heavenly tribulation couldn't harm him. Rumble. 9 days and 9 nights passed, and the power of the thunderbolts grew weaker and weaker until the 9-colored thunderclouds in the sky gradually dissipated. The number of thunderbolts striking down on Yi Xian also decreased. Clearly, this heavenly tribulation was about to pass, and Yi Xian's body was radiating an ethereal aura at this moment. Clearly, he was undergoing an indescribable transformation. The body of a half-immortal. That's right, the half-immortal body. This was an evolution in the level of life, and also the first step to turning a mortal into an immortal. Rumble. His blood and qi were like the sea, and his body was like glass. Yi Xian's face was filled with pain, and even his soul felt like it was being torn apart. However, he knew that he was developing in a good direction. As long as he could pass through this pain, he would be a big step closer to becoming an immortal in the mortal world. A month passed. The 9-colored thunderclouds in the sky disappeared, and Yi Xian's face was no longer filled with pain. His body was glowing. It was a kind of blood-red misty light, but there was a touch of immortal charm in it. Rumble. Golden lotuses fell from the sky, and sweet dew surged from the ground. The vegetation around Yi Xian had been destroyed, but in this vision of heaven and earth, it quickly bloomed with majestic vitality. The body of a half-immortal was formed. When Yi Xian opened his eyes, a faint immortal light flashed in his eyes. He clenched his fingers into fists, and it seemed like he was going to crush the space in his hands. His body seemed to be made of glass, and people who looked at him didn't dare to feel blasphemous. This is the body of a half-immortal? Yi Xian murmured to himself, and a touch of excitement flashed in his eyes. He could feel that although he was still in the tribulation realm, the world in front of him was obviously different. This feeling was indescribable, but it gave Yi Xian the illusion that he wanted to break open this world. It was as if he could break this world, he would step into a mysterious and unknown world. Yi Xian kept calming himself down and suppressed this uncontrollable emotion. After a dozen breaths, his fluctuating mind gradually calmed down. The tribulation of the inner demon didn't come? Yi Xian was slightly confused, and he murmured to himself, "Buzz." All of a sudden, golden lotuses filled the sky, and immortal light shone. While Yi Xian was deep in thought, a 10,000-foot immortal gate slowly appeared in the sky, and a faint immortal sound came from all directions. Such a scene stunned Yi Xian, and then he looked gloomily at the 10,000-foot immortal gate in the sky. Rumble. The 10,000-foot immortal gate slowly opened, and a huge amount of immortal qi spread out from the gate. A ray of Tongtian golden light spread out, and it enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian, 20 years old, and after 5 years of cultivation, you are qualified to be the fire sex side deity. Now that the immortal gate is open for you, Yi Xian, hurry up and enter. It was vast and majestic. A voice came from the 10,000-foot immortal gate, and Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, and his face became gloomier. Who are you? Yi Xian stood in the void, and his voice was strange and inexplicable. How dare you? I am the Thundersex righteous god, and I am here to welcome you into the earth immortal realm. Hurry up and enter. Thunder rumbled from the immortal gate, and millions of lightning flashed in the sky. Thundersex righteous god? Yixian said eerily. He looked around at the world, as if he wanted to see through all illusions and see the essence of things. This world was very real, so real that Yixian felt like he was about to ascend. It was as if as long as he entered the immortal gate, he could immediately become an immortal. Become an immortal. This was what Yixian had been thinking about day and night, and it was a desire that was buried deep in his heart. However, Yixian knew very well that he had not reached that step yet. The scene in front of him now was simply impossible. Moreover, Yixian was very calm, very calm. This was because the world he was in was at the end of the world, and it was called the Heaven and Earth Prison by the Earth Immortal Realm. How could the immortal gate be opened in this world? What a realistic scene. Is this the inner demon tribulation? Yixian knew that he had unknowingly fallen into the inner demon tribulation. Everything that he was seeing now was just an illusion of the inner demon tribulation. There was a trace of madness in Yixian's eyes, but there was also a touch of enthusiasm, and there was no fear in his eyes. The great tribulation of the inner demon was silent and didn't seem to have the slightest bit of power. However, Yixian knew that this kind of calamity was the most terrifying thing. Chapter 134. When the heavens and earth were created, all living things were born. All living things had emotions and desires. Even Daluo Jingxian, who was beyond the heavens and earth and was not part of the five elements, was no exception. For all living things, as long as they had desires, they would produce inner demons. And now, Yixian was experiencing the great inner demon tribulation. It was a desire that was born from the depths of his heart. Rumble. The heavens and earth exploded. 6 paths of reincarnation. The blood-red light around Yixian disappeared, and the light of the 6 paths of reincarnation surrounded him. Facing his own great inner demon tribulation, Yixian's face was filled with venom. His voice shook the heavens. The so-called inner demon is just a desire born from my own body. Let me, Yixian, see what this great inner demon tribulation can do to me. Yixian swung his arms and punched out. The 6 paths of law turned into fist radiance and blasted towards the immortal door. It caused the endless void to collapse violently. It was a terrifying scene. The 6 paths of reincarnation buried all living things and used it to overcome the great inner demon tribulation. This was very suitable for Yixian. Bam! The immortal door exploded, and a loud sound filled the sky. Before Yixian could react, the heavens and earth suddenly changed. When Yixian saw his surroundings clearly, he was completely stunned and speechless. In the vast firmament, in the endless void, immortal cranes were soaring, and fairies were singing. Immortal palaces were floating in the immortal clouds. The blazing immortal light illuminated the past and present. Rumbling purple clouds rose from the east, forming a 30,000-mile purple cloud bridge that led to the 9 heavens. Above the 9 heavens, a vast and boundless heavenly palace, as if it had been standing here since ancient times. 99,999 white jade steps led to the vast heavenly palace. The white jade steps rippled with immortal light, and misty immortal chi rose from them. In the vast heavenly palace, on the celestial emperor's throne, Yixian was wearing the celestial emperor's battle robe. The dark gold celestial emperor's battle robe was noble and majestic. He sat there with the celestial emperor's sword in his hand. Below him, countless immortals and gods knelt and kowtowed. We pay our respects to the heavenly emperor. The heavens trembled as celestial light filled the sky. When this scene appeared before Yixian's eyes, he clenched his fists tightly and his face flushed red. Above the 9 heavens, overlooking all living beings. Wasn't this what Yixian wanted the most? At this moment, Yixian's eyes were tightly shut as he took deep breaths. The sounds of worship in his ears caused his body to tremble. Immortals and gods bowing their heads, standing tall in the 9 heavens. This feeling is truly wonderful. After around a dozen breaths of time, Yixian slowly opened his eyes and looked at the prostrating immortals and gods below. A wisp of intoxication flashed through his eyes as he imprinted this scene deeply into his mind. However, a fake is still a fake. One day, I, Yixian, will truly rule over the 9 heavens and look down on all living beings. I will also recreate this scene. Crack! The heavenly emperor's sword broke into 2. and was casually thrown to the ground by Yi Xian. He tore apart the heavenly emperor's battle robe on his body, and swung his fist with incomparable confidence towards the immortals and gods in the 9 heavens. Rumble! The illusion shattered and heaven and earth turned upside down. When Yi Xian opened his eyes again, he was already in an extremely terrifying and strange place. The world was dark and the souls of the dead were wailing. A long river of blood flowed from the east to the west. In this endless sea of blood, miserable white bones bobbed up and down in the sea of blood. Countless vengeful spirits and evil spirits emerged and howled at Yi Xian. Kakik! Thousands of vengeful spirits and malicious spirits surrounded Yi Xian. Their eyes were sinister and sorrowful, and their mournful and unwilling howls made one's hair stand on end. Yi Xian, do you still remember me? A malicious spirit floated out and kept circling Yi Xian. His bulging eyes were terrifying and the blood on his face was dripping. Wasn't this Wu Jun who was killed by Yi Xian in Jiangnan City? Uncle, do you still remember me? A weak voice sounded out. A young child's eyes were bleeding, and his neck had long since been broken. He tilted his head and smiled sinisterly at Yi Xian. Isn't this the child from the Nangong family? Xian, I died so miserably. Give me back my life. The Li siblings had their heads separated from their bodies as they walked towards Yi Xian with their heads in their hands. Their mournful and unwilling laughter caused one to feel an extreme sense of fear when they looked at them. Yi Xian, you killed my father and my daughter. I'm going to take you to hell. Gu Dingtian and his daughter were bleeding all over. They were walking towards Yi Xian with a bitter smile. Chilly wind blew and the dead spirits cried. The figures killed by Yi Xian kept appearing around him. These vengeful spirits and malicious spirits were either crying or laughing. Their pale hands were grabbing towards Yi Xian. Resentment filled the sky and the dead spirits came for his life. The sea of blood was surging and the world was crying. Yi Xian was in the middle of it. His face was expressionless as he quietly watched the numerous dead spirits coming for his life. The 6 desires are heartless and the world is heartless. If I can kill you once, I can kill you a second time. Even if I, Yi Xian, am sent to hell, I will still be the head of all ghosts and the lord of hell. The world exploded and everything was annihilated. Yi Xian's voice was cruel and malevolent. His entire body emitted a vicious aura that reached the heavens, and that extremely poisonous and tyrannical aura caused the endless sea of blood to churn. All of you, go to hell. Rumble. Yi Xian's entire body erupted with a demonic light that shot into the heavens. He punched out, directly shattering Wu Jun into pieces. When he slashed out with his sword finger, the Li siblings howled miserably. The Nangong family's child was directly crushed to death by him. Wherever Yi Xian passed, the vengeful spirits and malicious spirits howled miserably. The endless sea of blood surged. He seemed to have turned into a sea of blood butcher. Wherever he passed, he would cause endless slaughter. Killing one is a sin. Killing 10,000 is a hero. Killing 9 million is a hero among heroes. Yi Xian roared violently. When he punched out, the Tongtian demonic fist seemed to have shattered the ancient and modern world. Countless vengeful spirits and malicious spirits howled miserably and trembled. They were all annihilated by his fist radiance. Rumble. The sea of blood was shattering and the world was shaking. The so-called heart demon illusory realm was cracking like a spider web as if it would break into pieces at any time. A mere heart demon illusory realm. How can these demons and monsters hurt me? Yi Xian's voice was domineering. His unbridled aura filled the world. When he took a step out, he had already walked out of the blood sea illusory realm. The blood-colored river behind him exploded and disappeared without a trace. Bang bang bang. 6 explosions sounded and the door appeared. The 6 paths of reincarnation door rotated slowly behind Yi Xian. It was as if 6 great stars were rotating. It rippled with an aura that could destroy heaven and earth. This was Yi Xian's law and Tao. He wanted to rely on the 6 paths of law to break through the heart demon illusory realm. Wang. Time seemed to be reversing and space seemed to be hanging upside down. The world where Yi Xian was rumbling and rotating. After an unknown amount of time, a scene appeared in front of Yi Xian. This made his expression instantly turn gloomy. A look of dread flashed across his eyes. In a simple and unadorned courtyard, there was a child's laughter and a loving face. The fragrance that assaulted his senses was unbearable. That touch of warmth kept attacking Yi Xian. Chapter 135. Everyone had their fears. Everyone would more or less feel uneasy about certain things. Even Yi Xian was no exception. Yi Xian believed that he could kill for thousands of years, and was not afraid to fight against the 9 heavens alone. Even if he had to fight against heaven and earth, he would not back down. However, the scene in front of him made Yi Xian's heart tremble. He did not know how to face it. Loving mother, little sister, brother. The 3 of them were very lifelike. They were smiling at Yi Xian in a courtyard. Yi Xian's eyes were a little dazed. In the depths of his memory, this courtyard was where he used to live. He was only 5 years old then. It was so long ago that Yi Xian felt like he was dreaming. This dream had never woken up. It was as if it had brought him back to that pure and innocent era. From the desire to become an immortal, to the power of the celestial emperor, to the vengeful spirits demanding his life, all kinds of inner demons were destroyed by Yi Xian. This was because Yi Xian's heart was like a boulder. He was not moved by external things at all. Finally, the inner demons produced the most terrible thing. That was the kinship that Yi Xian had always been attached to. Yi Xian knew that kinship was a kind of warmth and a kind of dependence to him. However, it was also this kind of kinship that tied him down and made him stay in this world. It was even more restrained. How could Yi Xian not know that if he severed his kinship and pursued the Tongtian Great Way wholeheartedly, he might have already ascended to the Earth Immortal realm and become a legendary immortal? However, Yi Xian was a human with flesh and blood. Although he was vicious and ruthless to his enemies, his actions were only to pursue what he wanted in his heart. 2 choices were finally placed in front of Yi Xian. Either he killed his loved ones and set foot on the Tongtian Great Way, or he sank into the sea of bitterness, never to be reincarnated. In this life, people had to make many choices. Often, some choices would change a person's life. The choice that Yi Xian was facing now might be the most critical turning point in his life. To kill or not to kill? Yi Xian raised his trembling fists and the 6 doors behind him began to rotate. Looking at Mother Ye's kind smile, Yi Xian's face turned pale and he couldn't bring himself to do it. Xiana, look at how dirty your clothes are. Did you get into a fight with someone again? Yi Xian's mother asked kindly. Although she was blaming Yi Xian, her eyes were filled with love. At this moment, Yi Xian's arms drooped down. His eyes were dazed and his body glowed. He turned into a 5-year-old child and let Mama Yi tidy up his clothes in a daze. Big brother, hurry up and eat. Mama made your favorite braised carp. Yi Ling was at the age where she was just learning to walk. She was pulling Yi Xian's arm and constantly shaking it. Mommy, I'm so hungry. Yi Ping was only a 3-year-old child and he was bawling loudly at the dining table. Such a scene made Yi Xian's heart palpitate because it was the deepest memory in his mind. Even if he died, Yi Xian couldn't forget it, because this year was the year when they were chased out of the Yi family and settled down in Jiangnan. Okay, let's eat. Let's eat, Yi Xian muttered to himself, completely immersed in his mental demons. He turned into a 5-year-old child and under Mama Ye's lead, the family finally sat down at the dining table and had their first reunion meal. Brother, this fish is for you. Yi Ling picked up the fish in her bowl and gave it to Yi Xian, her tender face full of joy. Brother, I want to eat the fish head. It was Yi Ping's voice. Xiana, you have to eat more. When you grow up, you have to take good care of your younger siblings. Mama Yi smiled kindly. Mother, I will definitely take good care of my younger siblings. The 5-year-old Yi Xian ate the fish in his bowl in big mouthfuls, his eyes full of warmth and gratitude. It was all because this scene had really happened to him before. Time sped up and the scene changed. In the kitchen, Mama Yi was carrying her children and eating the remaining fish bones on the plate. The 5-year-old Yi Xian secretly watched, his hands tightly clenched together. The wind and snow were intertwined and it was freezing cold. Yi Xian held the stolen fish bones tightly in his arms and was beaten viciously by the restaurant owner. When the restaurant owner left, Yi Xian was bruised all over and staggered back home. Today was Yi Xian's mother's birthday. When he sent the stolen fish bones to Mama Yi looked at Yi Xian's bruised body and sobbed, hugging Yi Xian tightly in her arms. Time flew and the years were like a song. Yixian was completely immersed in his inner demon's illusion, as he relived what had happened all those years ago. Just like that, year after year passed. When Yixian was 10 years old, he shielded Yiling tightly under his body and allowed the many bad students to beat him up. Brother, will you protect Ling forever? Yiling asked feebly. Yes, as long as I'm around, I won't let anyone bully you, the 10-year-old Yixian said firmly. In autumn, the two brothers sat on a haystack. Brother, I swear to the heavens that one day, I will become a superior person and let Mother, Ling and you live a prosperous life. Yixian's younger brother was born extraordinary. As long as I'm alive, I will protect you for the rest of your life. The two brothers swore to the heavens on the haystack. The scene sped up and time passed. Yixian met his first love when he was 12 years old. Xia Qingzhu, who was dressed in white, was smiling faintly at Yixian like a fairy in the wind. Brother Yixian, will you marry Qingzhu when you grow up? The young girl asked shyly while shaking the young man's arm. As long as you don't leave me, Yixian will definitely marry you, the young man confessed loudly. Kinship and ignorant love made Yixian sink into oblivion. He had already completely integrated into this world, and it was as if he had returned to that distant era. The year Yixian was 14 years old was the year he suffered from a terminal illness. However, in this mental demon's illusion, the terminal illness did not strike that year. Yixian grew up healthily, and his younger siblings did well in school. Xia Qingzhu was also by his side. A look of bewilderment flashed past Yixian's eyes. He felt that something was amiss, but in the warmth of kinship and love, that bit of doubt disappeared. Time passed little by little, and everything was progressing in a good direction. When Yixian was 18 years old, he was admitted to university. Xia Qingzhu was always by his side, and his younger siblings were admitted to a key high school. During university with Xia Qingzhu's company, the two of them started a business with great difficulty. In just 3 years they formed a business empire, and the group under their name entered the top 500 in the world. Several years passed, and Yixian's business was successful. He had a beautiful woman by his side, and his younger siblings had their own lovers. Yixian's mother was radiant, and there was no trace of decadence on her face. When Yixian was 25 years old, he finally welcomed his wedding. The Yi family congratulated him, and the Xia family married off their daughter. In the world's most luxurious hotel, under the gaze of many friends and family, Yixian and Xia Qingzhu married. Chapter 136. The smile of a loving mother, the congratulations of his younger brother and sister. Wasn't all of this what Yixian once wanted? On their wedding night, Xia Qingzhu lowered her head shyly. When the red candlelight was extinguished by Yixian, the wedding room was filled with boundless spring. A year passed. In the hospital's delivery room, Xia Qingzhu's painful wails could be heard. With the sound of a baby crying, Yixian, accompanied by Mama Yi and the others, rushed into the delivery room excitedly. Mr. Yi, congratulations. It's a boy. The doctor congratulated him and handed the baby to Yixian. My son. Yixian, who was a father for the first time, was so excited that he couldn't control himself. He took the baby in a hurry, his face full of happiness. Hubby, Xia Qingzhu said weakly. Yixian carried the baby and walked quickly to his wife. He was as happy as a child and said, Qingzhu, look, this is our child. Xia Qingzhu snuggled in Yixian's arms and was full of happiness. She said, hubby, this is our child. Let's call him Yi Shaoxian. Yi Shaoxian? Yixian murmured to himself, then quickly nodded and said, okay. Let's call him Yi Shaoxian. Time flew by like a white steed passing a crack. The days passed. Yixian's mother was happy to coax her grandson every day. Yixian's career was thriving. His wife was dignified and virtuous. She took care of the family in an orderly manner. His younger brother and sister were also married. Yixian was unable to extricate himself. Yixian was 50 years old. His hair was already gray. His son had also grown up and had his own lover. Yixian's mother was old. His younger brother and sister also had their own children. The once poor family finally had children. This life was peaceful and happy. Yixian was 60 years old. His hair was already white, and his wrinkled face was like the dried bark of an old tree. It was proof that he had entered his later years. That year Yixian finally had a grandson. However, it was also that year that a serious illness struck, causing Yixian to be bedridden. In a luxurious villa, Yixian's eyes were lifeless, and he couldn't even move his body. His entire body was wrapped in medical tubes, and an oxygen mask was placed over his mouth to provide him with a large amount of oxygen to sustain his dying life. By his side there was the old mother Yi, the younger brother and sister he wanted to protect for the rest of his life, and the wife and children he loved the most in his life. The house was filled with children and grandchildren. They were sobbing and crying. A sorrowful mood was spreading in the villa. "Grandpa, don't leave Xian." A little girl held onto Yixian's aged hand as she sobbed. "Dad, don't worry. I've already found the best doctors. They're on their way," Yi Xiaoxian said with a sorrowful expression. "Xian, you won't die." Yi Xiaoxuan's mother's eyes were filled with tears. "Brother." Yi Ling-er and her brother were both sobbing. "Hubby, how can you be so cruel? Are you going to abandon Qingzhu?" Xia Qingzhu cried sadly. At this moment, Yixian's eyes were cloudy. He looked at his family in a daze, and he kept recalling his life. He married and had children. He was filial to his parents and took care of his younger brother and sister. When he was on his deathbed, he had children and grandchildren by his side. Logically speaking, his life should have been perfect. However, Yixian didn't know why, but there was a hint of unwillingness in his heart. He felt that he had lost something very important. This thing was very important to him. It was as if it had already disappeared when he was 14 years old. Yixian tried his best to think about what he had lost. However, as his heartbeat became weaker and weaker, he still couldn't remember what he had lost. It was difficult to breathe, and his heart was failing. Yixian's body was emitting an aura of death. His body was gradually turning cold, and his eyes were starting to lose focus. It wouldn't be long before he passed away. At this moment, the loved ones surrounding Yixian no longer had grief on their faces. They actually had a strange smile on their faces as they looked at Yixian with eyes that had a trace of blood in them. "Am I going to die?" Yixian kept asking himself as he lay on his deathbed. "Yes, I'm really going to die. I've lived a life of glory and wealth. I should be satisfied. But why my heart is telling me I can't die yet. I've lost something. Something very important to me. Me? What did I lose?" Yixian felt as if his brain was being pricked by needles. He howled in pain, but he endured the pain and tried his best to recall his life. Who am I? Who am I? Is the person lying on the sickbed really me? No, he's not me. No, he's really me. Yixian howled in pain as if he was babbling nonsense. However, his body was emitting a terrifying demonic light, and the space around him was exploding violently. This scene caused Yixian's family members to change their expressions. Their eyes were sinister, but they were also extremely flustered. It was as if the situation was out of their control. "Xianer, don't worry and go. I'm very satisfied to have a son like you. Brother, don't worry. Second brother and I will take care of your children and grandchildren. Even if you pass away, we'll treat them like our own. Hubby, after you pass away, Qingzhu will come to accompany you. We'll still be husband and wife in our next life." All sorts of warm words were heard, but it only made the demonic light around Yixian even more terrifying. Rumble! The sky exploded and the world collapsed. A beam of demonic light seemed to shatter the ancient world, and it seemed to break through the barriers of time and space. Buzz! Yixian suddenly opened his eyes. His wrinkled skin stretched, and his pale hair turned black. His body, which seemed to be made of glass, was emitting a light that had never been seen before. Who am I? I'm Yixian. I'm the undying heavenly sovereign. I'm the man who will ascend the 9 heavens and look down on all living things. The void collapsed and the world exploded. Yixian roared at the sky. The demonic light of the Tongtian bloomed around him. His hair fluttered, and he seemed to have gone mad. How is this possible? Mama Ye's face was pale. She screamed, but her voice was extremely ear-piercing. This world is so real. It's so real that I almost died in this mental demon tribulation. Yi Xian's eyes drooped, and his body was trembling. Just a little bit, just a little bit. If not for Yi Xian's final radiance, he would have died in this mental demon illusion. Kakik. All of a sudden, Mama Yi laughed eerily, and the rest of his relatives looked sinister. A cold voice sounded in Yi Xian's ears. Yi Xian, so what if you've woken up? Your heart tells us that you can't break through the mental demon illusion we created. Your greatest weakness is your shackles to your family. If you want to leave this place, you have to kill your family with your own hands. But can you do it? Chapter 137. The heavenly demons danced wildly and made strange noises. This also made Yi Xian's face extremely sullen. A fake is still a fake. Today, Yi Xian will sever all emotions and desires and kill all of you one by one. Heaven-destroying halberd. Rumble. The void was shaking and the world was exploding. Yi Xian's glabella glowed and a 3-inch blood halberd shot out from his glabella. The 3-inch blood halberd expanded in the wind and was directly held in Yi Xian's hand. The blood-red halberd and ancient patterns on the body of the halberd were emitting an unprecedented evil aura. First kill my wife, then kill my son. The roar shattered the mountains and rivers and shook the earth. Yi Xian's face was emotionless and cold. When the halberd blasted out, Xia Qingzhu and Yi Shaoxian were directly killed on the spot. You killed my sister-in-law and my entire family. The blood-red halberd was cold and terrifying. When it blasted out, it killed all of them. Yiling or Yi Ping. And all the children and grandchildren in the mental demon illusion were all smashed into pieces by Yi Xian's merciless halberd. Boom boom boom. The void shattered and the sound of explosions rang out. Yi Xian seemed to have gone mad, but his body and soul were trembling because the mental demon illusion was too real. Everything that Yi Xian experienced was deeply engraved in his mind. Every time he killed someone, his heart seemed to be dripping blood. Everything was silent and the world was silent. A benevolent face, a pair of sorrowful eyes. Mother Yi smiled sadly and said, Xianer, kill me. This way, you can truly walk out of your heart's demon illusion and pursue what you want in your heart. Clang. Looking at Mother Ye's benevolent face and hearing her sad words, Yi Xian's body trembled. The heaven-destroying halberd in his hand fell to the ground with a loud bang. Yi Xian knew that the Mother Yi in front of him was fake, and was also formed by the mental demon. He only had to wave the halberd, and he could completely escape from the mental demon tribulation. However, this was a choice, an extremely heartless choice. If Yi Xian really slashed with the halberd, it meant that Yi Xian could also do the same to Mother Yi in reality. However, how could Yi Xian do such a heartless thing? The reason why the mental demon illusion was so feared by immortal cultivators was that it could reflect reality and force a person into a dead end. Now that Yi Xian couldn't get past himself, that was the most terrifying part. Mental demon illusion. Xianer, do you still remember? When you were young, I carried you on my back and walked for a full 10 miles because of a bad cold. Only then did I send you to the hospital. That year it was windy and snowy. That year my hands and feet were covered in blisters, but I worked hard to raise enough money for your medical fees. I hope that you could grow up healthily. Don't say any more. The Mother Yi that was formed by the mental demon made a sorrowful voice. It also made Yi Xian's face go crazy. He clutched his head and screamed loudly. Obviously, he was forced to live by the choice in front of him. Rumble. Suddenly, the heaven-punishing halberd was undergoing a great change throughout the eons of time. Buzz. The blood-red halberd floated into Yi Xian's hand. Before Yi Xian could react, a thick demonic light enveloped Yi Xian's body. Kill. A cold voice sounded out from the heaven-punishing halberd, causing Yi Xian to feel as if he'd been bewitched. The black pupils in his eyes gradually disappeared, and his eyeballs actually turned deathly white. Emotionless and without desire, killing the world. Rumble. Yi Xian struck out with his halberd. The Mother Yi that was formed by the mental demon suddenly exploded and disappeared without a trace. The world cracked like a spider web. With a loud explosion, Yi Xian finally walked out of the mental demon illusion. The world was clear and bright, with green mountains and clear waters. On the peak of the mountain, the vegetation was lush and green. A cool breeze blew, bringing with it the fragrance of grass. Yixian knelt on the ground. His deathly white eyeballs gradually returned to their black color, and the strange devilish light around him also dissipated. The heavenly punishing halberd turned into a black light and once again fused into the center of his brows. "What did I do?" Yixian asked with a trembling voice. He stared fixedly at his hands as a sense of guilt that seeped into his bones continuously grew in his body and mind. It made him feel so painful that he couldn't breathe. Just now, he seemed to have been injected with some kind of terrifying power. He became emotionless and ruthless and killed the Mother Yi that was formed by the mental demon. But when he regained his consciousness, the heart-wrenching pain made Yixian feel so guilty that he wanted to roar out loud. The mental demon was easy to overcome, but the human heart was hard to escape. Even though Yixian had passed through this great tribulation of his inner demons, cultivated a half-immortal body, and was invincible in this world, he couldn't pass through this trial. Yixian's hair was messed up. He roared to the sky. His eyes were filled with madness. He roared as if he had gone mad. This roar seemed to be asking the heavens why they did this to him. Rumble. The sky exploded and the earth shook. When Yixian fell into madness, the power in his body completely erupted. The terrifying power shot out in all directions. Bang! 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 The mountains exploded and the earth collapsed. The endless void was annihilated and restored. The vegetation in the forest turned into ashes. The shrill and crazy roar caused the birds and beasts in the forest to explode into a bloody mist. The scene was like the end of the world. Boom! All of a sudden, Yixian's aura went crazy. He rushed into the clouds as if he had gone mad. He completely disappeared from the mountain peak, leaving behind the vast mountains that had been destroyed. It was as if they had been bombed by a nuclear bomb. In the vast world, thousands of miles of clouds. Yixian was like a blood-colored meteor as he moved about in the sky. The clouds were exploding and the void was exploding. That unparalleled power rippled in all directions, causing people to feel an extreme sense of fear when they looked at him. Chi! Suddenly, Yixian slowly closed his eyes. He stretched out his arms and allowed his body to fall to the ground. Yixian was tired. He was really tired. This had nothing to do with his cultivation. It was a mental fatigue. He just wanted to have a good sleep. When he woke up, he wondered if he would be able to wake up from the sorrow in his heart. Eastern Sea. The sky and water were the same color. The blue waves rippled and the sea was clear. A huge wave came crashing, causing a fishing boat to rise and fall in the sea. It was as if it would be swallowed by the waves at any time. "Sis, quick, look, there's someone in the sea." There was a young man with copper skin, but there was a hint of delicateness between his brows. He was dressed in simple clothes, and he was shouting at a woman with a panicked expression. "Beichen, don't joke around. With such a huge wave, if a person was in the sea, he would have sunk to the bottom and been eaten by the fish." The woman was about 18 or 19 years old. She frowned and reprimanded the young man. "Sis, I'm not lying to you. Come and take a look." As the young man's anxious voice sounded, the woman's expression changed. She quickly came to her little brother's side and looked at the sea. The waves rose and fell and the sea was blue. A slender figure was floating in the sea. His messy hair covered his face, making it impossible to see what he looked like. "Quick, save him." Looking at this scene, the woman said anxiously. Chapter 138. The siblings skillfully cast the fishing net, and after a laborious effort, they finally rescued the person. "Little brother, quick, check if he's still breathing." The youth did not dare to delay and hurriedly tested the person's breathing. When he found that the person was still alive, he let out an excited cry. "Sister, he's not dead yet." Boom! Boom! The fishing boat's engine roared as the youth steered the fishing boat back. In the cabin, a cotton blanket covered Yixian's body, and a heater was placed beside him, making the small space very warm. Suddenly a roar was heard. Yixian suddenly opened his eyes. His face was twisted and ferocious. As if he had gone mad, he kicked the heater beside him to the ground, and the wooden bed beneath him was smashed into pieces. An extremely crazy aura was released from his body, as if he had just had a terrible nightmare. Creak. The cabin door was pushed open. Seeing the scene in front of her, the woman's face turned pale, but she still quickly walked over and gently hugged Yixian. She comforted him gently, "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. It's all in the past. It's all in the past." As the woman comforted him gently, Yixian's body stiffened. His ferocious and terrifying expression was also slightly sluggish. His eyes gradually focused, and he finally saw the appearance of the girl in front of him. She had a simple ponytail, clear eyes, and wheat-colored skin. It was obvious that she had drifted on the sea for many years and was exposed to the sun. The girl was not very beautiful, and there was a fishy smell on her body, but she gave off a refreshing and sunny feeling. "Who are you?" Yixian was not used to being hugged by a girl. He slowly pushed the girl away and looked at her with a slightly gloomy gaze. "Hello, I'm Gu Xiaoxiao. What's your name?" Simple and generous but not lacking in etiquette. Gu Xiaoxiao smiled, and it was as if her smile lit up the dark cabin. Gu Xiaoxiao extended her right hand toward Yixian. However, Yixian's expression froze, and he stared deeply at her. After several breaths of time, Yixian had a strange expression on his face, but he still stretched out his right hand and grasped Gu Xiaoxiao's hand. The girl's hands were rough, and there were many calluses on her palms. Clearly, this was the result of years of work. This was what Yixian felt. "Hey, you haven't told me your name yet." With Yixian holding her hand, Gu Xiaoxiao did not show the bashfulness of other women. Instead, she spoke in a natural and unrestrained manner. Letting go of the girl's hand, Yixian's black hair covered his face. His voice was slightly low as he said, "I don't have a name." "You're lying. Everyone has a name. Why don't you have one?" Gu Xiaoxiao asked. "Sister, he's awake?" Unknowingly, a young man had entered the cabin. "He's my younger brother, Gu Beichen. We were fishing at sea today, but we found you drifting in the sea, so we saved you." Gu Xiaoxiao introduced her younger brother, as she recounted the process of saving Yixian. Unfortunately, Yixian did not say anything from the beginning to the end. This caused the siblings to mistakenly think that Yixian was still in shock, and had not recovered from the shock. "Sister, he's like a block of wood." The young man, Gu Beichen, said softly. "Don't talk nonsense. It's not good if others hear you." Gu Xiaoxiao reprimanded softly. The fishing boat was on its way back. After several hours of sailing, they finally returned to the mainland. As the fishing boat docked, the siblings and Yixian finally stepped onto the dock. In front of the dock, Gu Xiaoxiao looked at Yixian, who was still silent. She could only shake her head helplessly and say, "We can only send you here. Hurry home." "Aya, sister, don't bother about him. We've already done our best. Let's hurry home and eat." The young man, Gu Beichen, pulled his sister and walked away. However, Yixian did not move at all from the beginning to the end. "Where's my home?" In front of the dock, Yixian looked into the distance. His eyes were lost, and his voice was extremely bitter. Although Yixian had survived this mental demon tribulation safely and even attained a half-immortal body, he would be able to become an immortal in the mortal world, as long as he cultivated to the late stage of tribulation transcendence. Becoming an immortal. What a tempting word. This was also what Yixian had always hoped for. However, the current Yixian was at a loss. Could it be that for the sake of becoming an immortal, he could be so heartless as to kill all of his loved ones? Is the price of becoming an immortal the death of one's loved ones? Yixian muttered to himself. He could not understand and did not dare to think about it. Because he could not get over himself, he was still immersed in this sorrowful emotion. "Hey, why are you still here? Don't you want to go home?" Gu Xiaoxiao had returned at some point with a complicated expression on her face. Unfortunately, Yixian did not reply. He was still immersed in his own thoughts. Perhaps when he found the answer in his heart, he would be able to free himself from this sorrowful state of mind. Looking at Yixian, who was as silent as a block of wood, Gu Beichen said unhappily, "Sister, I told you not to bother about him. You just had to come back. Look at how he's ignoring you. You still, all right, little brother, stop talking." Gu Xiaoxiao reprimanded. At this time the sun was setting and the sky was gradually darkening. Looking at Yixian's unmoving silence, Gu Xiaoxiao sighed helplessly and said, "If you're willing, you can stay at my house for a night. Tomorrow, I'll send you to the hanging mirror department in town and help you contact your family. What do you think?" "Sister, are you crazy? How can you bring a stranger home?" The young man's expression changed. "All right, can't you see that his mental state is very abnormal? He might have lost his memory in this shipwreck. Since we've rescued him, are we going to leave him here and not care about him?" Gu Xiaoxiao frowned slightly. She pulled Yixian's hand and walked into the distance. This made the young man smile helplessly and could only quickly follow the two of them. Because Little River Village was located on the coast of the East Sea, the villagers here had been fishing for a living for generations. Although their lives were not very rich, they were still self-sufficient. Compared to the bustling metropolis, it was less noisy and had a sense of peace and tranquility. At this time it was night time. Every family was cooking. Wisps of smoke rose from the kitchen, bringing vitality to Little River Village. "Girl Gu, you're back." An old man greeted Gu Xiaoxiao and her brother kindly. "Little child Beichen, who is this person?" A middle-aged woman was asking about Yixian's background. "Him. His name is Blockhead. He's a beggar that my sister picked up." Gu Beichen still had the temperament of a young man. He was very unhappy that his sister had brought an outsider home. Faced with the villagers' questions, he directly gave Yixian a code name. "Little brother, if you continue to be so impudent, see how I'll deal with you when we get home." Gu Xiaoxiao showed the demeanor of an elder sister and sternly reprimanded the young man. Chapter 139. Hearing his sister's stern voice, Gu Beichen stuck out his tongue and said, "Okay sister, I know I was wrong. I'm starving. Let's go home quickly." As he spoke he ran home. Gu Xiaoxiao shook her head helplessly. She held Yixian's hand tightly and hurried home. At the end of the Little River Village, a dilapidated two-story tile-roofed house stood there. The walls were mottled and the rusty door was dilapidated. It was obvious that this house had been around for some time. As Gu Xiaoxiao opened the door, the three of them entered the house together. In the house of the siblings, the old and antique furniture seemed to be left behind from the last century. Under the dim light, it gave people a feeling of having four bare walls, which also proved that the siblings' lives were obviously very tight. "Sit here properly and don't move. I'm going to cook now. If I find you running around when I come back, I'll punish you by not having dinner today. Do you hear me?" Gu Xiaoxiao pressed Yixian down on the chair as if she was coaxing a 3-year-old child. She kept reminding Yixian. Then she put on an apron and walked into the kitchen to start the fire and start cooking dinner. At the dining table, the young Gu Beichen sat in the chair, bored. When he saw Yixian sitting opposite him with his black hair covering his face, he became even more mischievous. "Let me see what a blockhead like you looks like." The young Gu Beichen giggled and walked carefully to Yixian's side. He reached out to brush away Yixian's hair. All of a sudden, a pair of hands that were as white as jade quietly grabbed Gu Beichen's neck and lifted him into the air. His eyes, which were hidden under Yixian's hair, were emitting a cruel and cold light. "Sister, save me." The young Gu Xiaoxiao immediately rushed out of the kitchen when the young Gu Beichen shouted. When she saw the young Gu Beichen's face turning red and struggling in Yixian's hands, she hurried to Yixian and said anxiously, "Quick, put him down." At this moment, the murderous glint in Yixian's eyes faded. He glanced at Gu Xiaoxiao and released the young man. Then he got up and walked towards the door. "Hey, it's so late. Where are you going?" Before Yixian could walk out of the house, Gu Xiaoxiao hurriedly blocked his way. "This is not a place for me to stay," Yixian said in a low voice. "You can leave if you want, but it's already so late. How about I send you to town tomorrow?" Gu Xiaoxiao was a kind-hearted girl. She knew very well that there were no street lights in Little River Village. Moreover, the road outside was rugged. If anything happened to Yixian, her conscience would not be at ease. Cough, cough, cough. "Sis, he almost strangled me to death." The young man kept coughing, clearly frightened by Yixian's methods. "You little rascal. He was fine before. You must have done something to make him like this." Gu Xiaoxiao knew that her little brother was extremely mischievous. Although she did not see what happened just now, she could guess that her little brother must have done something to cause such a scene. TSK, I just wanted to see what he looked like. Who knew that he would be so fierce? The young man mumbled. Come back with me for dinner. I'll send you to the hanging mirror department in town tomorrow morning. Before Yixian could refuse, Gu Xiaoxiao pulled him by the arm and brought him back to the dining table. Then she quickly brought out the dishes from the kitchen. Wow, sis, you actually made braised carp? Gu Beichen was still a young man. When he saw the delicious food on the table, he immediately forgot about what had just happened. He picked up his chopsticks and was about to dig in. Little rascal, this is for him. Gu Xiaoxiao casually slapped the young man's chopsticks away. The young man's expression turned bitter. He said unhappily, sis, you're biased. You treat an outsider better than you treat me. Looking at her little brother's aggrieved face, Gu Xiaoxiao's expression turned bitter. She picked up a piece of fish head and put it into the young man's bowl. She comforted him. Little brother, he's a guest and he's not in a good state of mind. Shouldn't we take care of him? Sis, I understand. Although the young man was mischievous, he knew that his sister did not have it easy. He obediently ate the food in his bowl and gradually calmed down. Although I don't know your name, since you're able to come to our house, this is fate. Eat more. As Gu Xiaoxiao spoke, she kept putting fish meat into Yixian's bowl, while she ate the salted vegetables and white rice on the table. The smile on her face was bright and cheerful. Looking at this scene, Yixian's cloudy eyes lit up slightly. He looked deeply at Gu Xiaoxiao. No one knew what he was thinking. Then, he picked up his chopsticks and put the fish meat in his bowl into his mouth. Is it good? Seeing Yixian eat the food she made, Gu Xiaoxiao smiled and said. Yixian chewed carefully. However, after 2 mouthfuls, he put down his chopsticks. This startled Gu Xiaoxiao. She asked, is it because my food is not to your taste? You are very kind. Yixian was silent for a few breaths. Finally, he raised his head and looked at Gu Xiaoxiao. But, the kind people in this world are destined to be plagued with misfortune, Yixian said in a hoarse voice. He placed the fish meat in his bowl in front of the siblings. Then he became silent again. Hearing Yixian's words, Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes became absent-minded. A trace of bitterness flashed across her eyes. When we were 10 years old, our parents died in a shipwreck. Although we lost our parents, I still believe that there is love in this world. If you can face the world with kindness, the world will also treat us with kindness. When Gu Xiaoxiao said this, happiness appeared on her face. She pointed at the house and said, do you see our house? The villagers helped us repair it. Because they are all very kind, we were able to have a place to live. So I have always believed that no matter how difficult the future is, as long as we have kind hearts, we will definitely be rewarded. That's right. My sister and I have vowed to become kind people. In the future, we will earn a lot of money to repair the houses of the villagers so that they can live a good life. The young man said passionately. Sincere eyes and happy faces. When Yixian saw this scene, his heart was deeply touched. He could not understand. The siblings clearly came from poor families. Even their parents had died in a shipwreck. Why were they such kind people? I believe that human nature is evil. In this world, no one can be trusted except yourself. Yixian slowly shook his head. His words stunned the siblings. You are wrong. If you treat everyone with sincerity, they will definitely treat you with sincerity. Gu Xiaoxiao firmly believed in her theory. Sincerity? Kindness? I don't think I have. Yixian's eyes were confused. The aura around him became even more confused. Chapter 140. This pair of siblings allowed Yixian to see another world. He couldn't understand this world, nor could he understand it. He couldn't understand why their lives were so miserable, so why were they in such a blissful state? The dinner ended hastily. Gu Xiaoxiao tidied up the attic for Yixian to live in. When the siblings returned to their rooms, Yixian sat in the attic in a daze. He looked at the bright moon in the sky through the window. His eyes filled with inexplicable confusion. I've never believed that good will be rewarded with good. I only believe that my life is in my own hands, and not in the hands of the heavens. Let me see if there's really such a kind person in this world. Yixian slowly closed his eyes and sat cross-legged on the bed quietly. Yixian suffered a great calamity in his mental demon's illusion. Although he survived the calamity and attained a half-immortal body, he was filled with guilt for killing his loved ones in the end. He was in so much pain that he constantly denied himself. He didn't know if he was right or wrong, and he had been searching for this answer. Yixian had a very strange feeling. It was as if there was a voice in the dark telling him that Gu Xiaoxiao, this kind woman, might be able to give him the answer he wanted. This was also the reason why he didn't leave this place. The next morning, the sound of a rooster crowing came from the river village, and the sun rose slowly in the east. "Blockhead, you're up." Young Gu Beichen's voice came from outside the door, and Yixian slowly opened his eyes. When Yixian walked out of the attic, breakfast was already on the table. "I still don't know what your name is. Since you're unwilling to tell me, can I call you Blockhead too?" Gu Xiaoxiao probed softly. Unfortunately, Yixian didn't respond at all. This made Gu Xiaoxiao try calling him again. She realized that Yixian didn't have any reaction, and this made Gu Xiaoxiao feel slightly more at ease. After all, Gu Xiaoxiao couldn't just call Yixian hey hey hey. During breakfast, Yixian also learned some things from the discussion between the siblings. Other than helping his sister to fish at sea during his rest time, the youth spent the rest of his time attending school in the town. On the other hand, Gu Xiaoxiao had dropped out of school early to support the family. Today was Gu Beichen's first day of school, so they could send Yixian to the hanging mirrors department in town to look for his family. After breakfast was hastily finished, the two siblings dragged Yixian out of the house. They walked for 10 li on a rugged road before they boarded a bus to town. Qingshui Town. It was a rich town. Although the town wasn't big because it was adjacent to the East Sea, it was rich in marine products. Under the natural favorable terrain, Qingshui Town's economy was very developed. Qingshui High was Gu Beichen's school. As a large number of students entered the school, under Gu Xiaoxiao's earnest instructions, the young Gu Beichen waved at his sister and followed the flow of students into the school. "Blockhead, I'll take you to the hanging mirrors department in town." After sending her brother to school, Gu Xiaoxiao pulled Yixian's hand and was about to rush to the hanging mirrors department in town. However, under Gu Xiaoxiao's tug, Yixian didn't budge. His voice was hoarse as he said, "I don't have a home, and I don't know where my future is. The so-called hanging mirrors department doesn't have any information about me." What? Hearing Yixian's words, Gu Xiaoxiao was stunned. She exclaimed, "How can you not have a home? Are you an illegal resident? What should we do?" Gu Xiaoxiao stared blankly at Yixian. She bit her lips slightly. Clearly, she had encountered an extremely difficult problem. "Will you abandon me?" Yixian's eyes were deep, and his voice was unfathomable. "Of course not." Gu Xiaoxiao's answer was resolute and decisive, without the slightest hesitation. But, when she learned that Yixian was an illegal resident, Gu Xiaoxiao was extremely troubled. After all, Yixian didn't have an ID card, so it was very inconvenient for him to do anything. However, if she took Yixian in, there would be an extra set of chopsticks at home. Moreover, her brother was in school, and that was where the money was needed. Thinking of all these difficulties, Gu Xiaoxiao was even more distressed. Suddenly, Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes lit up. She looked directly at Yixian and said, "I can take you in, but you have to work with me. I can provide you with food and accommodation. If we sell more fish and prawns, I can even pay you. If you are willing to stay, you can stay." "Okay." Yixian nodded slowly. If this scene was seen by people familiar with Yixian, their jaws would drop to the ground in horror. Who was Yixian? He was a cultivator in the tribulation stage, and was about to become an immortal. His terrifying reputation was even more frightening in the Xia kingdom. Such a person was actually willing to work for a fisherwoman. If word got out, people would probably think that it was a fantasy. Day after day, time passed very quickly. In the blink of an eye, Yixian had already lived in Gu Xiaoxiao's house for half a year. Every day, when the sky was just beginning to brighten, the two of them went out to sea to fish under Gu Xiaoxiao's guidance. They didn't return until sunset. Yixian also changed into simple clothes and worked hard with Gu Xiaoxiao every day. It wasn't known if Yixian was Gu Xiaoxiao's lucky star, or if it was a blessing from the heavens. Ever since the two of them went out to sea to fish together, they had a bountiful harvest every day, and they didn't encounter any dangerous situations. However, Gu Xiaoxiao had always been very curious about Yixian's appearance. This was because no matter when, Yixian's hair would always cover his face, preventing Gu Xiaoxiao from seeing his true face. Of course, a woman's curiosity was very frightening. There was once when Gu Xiaoxiao wanted to take advantage of Yixian's inattention to brush away his hair, but Yixian stopped her with a cold look. From then on, Gu Xiaoxiao never did that again. However, the curiosity in her heart only grew stronger. Aside from her curiosity about Yixian's appearance, something else happened that made Gu Xiaoxiao realize that Yixian was becoming more and more mysterious. A zither. A 9-string zither. It was unknown when it had been passed down, but it had always been Gu Xiaoxiao's family's most prized possession. Until one night, when the moon was bright and the stars were few, the melodious and low sound of the zither rang out in the Gu family's courtyard. Gu Xiaoxiao would never forget the scene she saw. A cool breeze brushed the willows and birds chirped. In the narrow courtyard, 2 willow trees swayed with the wind. Under the moonlight, their emerald green leaves appeared bright and otherworldly. An ancient 9-string zither, and a lonely and desolate person. He sat alone under the moonlight and slowly played the zither. The sound of the zither was low and melodious, with an indescribable sadness. It attracted countless birds to circle in the air, as if they were attracted by the sound of the zither, and they stayed for a long time. The sound of the zither was like water, melodious and mellow. When the song ended, Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes became misty, and her heart was filled with sadness. She didn't know where the sadness came from, but she could feel that the person playing the zither under the moonlight had gone through an extremely sorrowful past. With a thought, all rivers and mountains are filled with emotion. With a thought gone, the sea turns into mulberry fields, and there is no heart left. The voice was like the netherworld, lonely and grave. When Yixian's voice rang out, it woke Gu Xiaoxiao from her sadness. Chapter 141. When the song ended, the world fell silent, and the small courtyard regained its tranquility. Only Yixian sat alone under the moon, deep in thought. No one knew what he was thinking. Moo, moo moo. Who are you? Although Gu Xiaoxiao was a fisherwoman and did not have high standards, she was not stupid. She knew very well that someone who could play such a song would not be an ordinary person. Who I am is not important. What's important is that I never believed that there was such a so-called kind person in this world, and you just happened to appear in front of me. A cool breeze blew over, causing a few strands of Yixian's hair to flutter. His eyes were as deep as an ancient pond, causing Gu Xiaoxiao to lightly bite her lips. Then she smiled and said, "Is that why you're staying by my side?" Perhaps, Yixian said hoarsely. As the days passed, Little River Village was quiet and peaceful. It was less noisy than the city, but it was more tranquil and peaceful. Besides fishing with Gu Xiaoxiao every day, Yixian would play the zither when he had nothing to do. Gu Xiaoxiao became his only loyal listener. Today was the day that Gu Beichen returned home. Because his home was far from school, he could only return home twice a month. This made Gu Xiaoxiao prepare some delicacies for her brother to eat. In the kitchen, waves of fragrance wafted out as exquisite dishes were served to the table by Gu Xiaoxiao. As for Yixian, he was quietly reading an ancient book. His entire body was slightly calm. Creak. The sound of the door being pushed open could be heard. Gu Beichen was dirty all over. His simple clothes were torn and his eyes were red, as if he had just cried. "Little brother, what happened?" Gu Xiaoxiao asked anxiously when she saw her little brother's appearance. "Sister, do we have to be bullied because we are poor?" The young man threw himself into his sister's arms and choked with sobs. Tears flowed from his eyes uncontrollably. You fought with your classmates?" Gu Xiaoxiao's expression was complicated and her voice sounded tired. "Sister, I listened to you and didn't fight back. But they called me an orphan and a poor fisherman. They said that I will never be successful in this life. All right, don't cry. Gu Xiaoxiao comforted him softly. Although we are poor, we won't steal or rob, and we won't hurt anyone. We are poor, but we have ambition. As long as you study hard, you will become a useful person in the future. Ha! Suddenly a sneer rang out, startling the siblings and causing them to look towards Yixian. At this moment, Yixian put down his book and looked at the youth through his hair. His voice was strange and inexplicable as he said, "Do you not want to be bullied? Mumu, you?" Hearing Yixian's words, the young man bit his lips and nodded. Actually, this matter is very simple. When you return to school tomorrow, find the person who scolded you the most and beat you the most. Beat him up until he begs for mercy. From then on, no one will bully you in school. Yixian's voice was calm, but it was filled with a seductive charm. But I can't beat him. The young man stammered. Can't beat him? Yixian laughed, but his laughter was very sinister. He said, you are wrong. As long as your heart is vicious enough and your methods are ruthless enough, you will definitely be able to beat him. As long as you defeat the fiercest person in school, all the students will be afraid of you. Naturally, no one will bully you. Really? The young man stuttered. Whether it is true or not, you can try. After Yixian finished speaking, he did not say anything else. He picked up his book again and calmly read it. These words caused Gu Xiaoxiao's expression to change greatly. She hurriedly warned the young man, "Little brother, you absolutely cannot do this. You must remember that you are a kind person. If you do this, then won't you also become a bad student? How is that different from the people who bullied you? If I find out that you are fighting in school, see how I will deal with you." Gu Xiaoxiao glared hatefully at Yixian, then loudly warned her little brother. "Elder sister, I understand." Under Gu Xiaoxiao's abuse of power, the young man hurriedly nodded in response. However, there was a hint of agitation in his eyes. Clearly, Yixian's words were like a curse that was deeply imprinted in the young man's mind. Dinner was quickly finished. The young man, Gu Beichen, once again regained his lively temperament and watched the program on the television. Meanwhile, Gu Xiaoxiao dragged Yixian out of the room, her face full of anger. In the small courtyard, Gu Xiaoxiao and Yixian stood facing each other. "Blockhead, you are too much. How can you teach my brother like that?" Gu Xiaoxiao reprimanded. "Kind people are bullied, and kind horses are ridden. Don't you understand this principle?" Yixian said calmly. You are talking nonsense." Gu Xiaoxiao's face flushed red. She was so angry at Yixian that she was speechless. As a person, we must be kind. As long as we have a kind heart, we will definitely be rewarded. Gu Xiaoxiao persisted in her beliefs. "Oh," Yixian said softly, "since you believe that people are kind by nature, and I believe that people are evil by nature, then let's make a bet. Let's see who is right and who is wrong." Yixian's words made Gu Xiaoxiao raise her voice. She asked, "How do you want to bet?" "Let's bet on whether Gu Beichen will do as I say. How about that?" Yixian said calmly. "All right, let's bet. But let me tell you, my little brother has never been in a fight since he was young. He is also a kind child. You will definitely lose." Gu Xiaoxiao stomped her feet angrily and turned to return to the house. Looking at Gu Xiaoxiao's angry back, Yixian's eyes were slightly unfocused. His voice was hoarse as he said, "If this world was filled with people like you, why would there be so many conflicts?" The next morning, when the first ray of sunlight rose from the east, the young man, Gu Beichen, also walked out of the house. Under Gu Xiaoxiao's earnest instructions, the young man rushed to school. Yixian stood in the attic and watched the young man's figure disappear into the distance. A strange smile appeared on his face. "Gu Xiaoxiao, when you see the changes in your little brother, will you still believe in such boring things as people being kind by nature?" Yixian said in a hoarse voice. Half a month passed quickly. This day the young man, Gu Beichen, returned home. As usual, Gu Xiaoxiao prepared a meal and waited for her brother to return. When the sun was setting, light footsteps could be heard from outside the door. "Sister, I'm back." Before Gu Xiaoxiao could go out to welcome him, Gu Beichen pushed open the door and entered the house quickly. However, the scene in front of her stunned Gu Xiaoxiao. What did she see? The young man, Gu Beichen, was wearing brand new clothes and sports shoes. He was holding a large number of gifts in his hands. He was standing excitedly in front of Gu Xiaoxiao. Chapter 142. Little brother. Where did you get these things? Gu Xiaoxiao's face was pale and her voice was trembling. A bad feeling rose in her heart. Sis, don't worry about it. I bought this set of clothes for you. Oh right, this set of clothes is for Blockhead. We won't be eating at home today. I'll treat you to a restaurant outside. Gu Beichen said as he put down the gifts in his hands. He did not notice the tears in Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes. Slap. Suddenly, a loud slap landed on the young man's face. The young man was stunned and only then did he see the tears on Gu Xiaoxiao's face. Sister. Tell me, where did you get these things? Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes were red as she questioned the young man loudly. The young man was really panicking because in his memory, his sister rarely hit him, and she had never shed a single tear in front of him. No matter how hard it was for his sister, she had always bitterly supported this family. But what did he see today? His sister was crying. That kind of sorrowful cry made the young man extremely flustered. He even forgot about the pain on his face. He lowered his head nervously and said in a trembling voice, Sister, don't be angry. These things were given to me by my classmates. For you? Gu Xiaoxiao was disappointed and said in a choked voice, Come, tell me. Why did your classmates give you these expensive things? Where did you get the money to treat us to a meal? Faced with Gu Xiaoxiao's questioning, the young man's face turned red and he did not know how to answer. Speak. Gu Xiaoxiao choked and reprimanded. I beat up Li Huan and the rest. They said that I'll be their boss in the future. And the other classmates gave me money, and called me Brother Chan. Gu Beichen said with a red face. I'll beat you to death, you bastard. Without waiting for the young man to finish, Gu Xiaoxiao's tears flowed down. She picked up a feather duster and hit the young man hard. The young man cried out, but he did not dare to dodge. What did I teach you? Although we are poor, we never bully others. What did you do? Gu Xiaoxiao hit the young man hard, but tears kept falling from her eyes. Sister, I know I was wrong. The young man grimaced from the beating, but his sister's crying made him feel even worse. Scram. From now on, I don't have a brother like you. Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes reddened, and the feather duster in her hand fell to the ground. Sis, I really know I was wrong. Please don't chase me away. The young man was truly panicking. He cried out loud and knelt in front of Gu Xiaoxiao, begging for his sister's forgiveness. You're not allowed to eat tonight. Go kneel in front of our parents' memorial tablets and repent. After all, he was her younger brother. How could Gu Xiaoxiao bear to chase him away? However, the young man's actions were unacceptable to Gu Xiaoxiao. As the young man sobbed, he finally knelt in front of his parents' memorial tablets to repent. This made Gu Xiaoxiao bite her lips and run out of the house. At this moment, Yixian watched this scene silently, his deep eyes calm. He slowly walked out of the door, only to see Gu Xiaoxiao squatting in the small courtyard, secretly weeping. You've lost, Yixian said in a hoarse voice. Yes, I've lost. Are you happy now? Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes were red as she reprimanded Yixian loudly. Why should I be happy? Yixian's voice was calm as he slowly walked to Gu Xiaoxiao. He looked at her through his hair and said, I just want to tell you something. This world isn't as beautiful as you think it is. Human nature is greedy and selfish. The so-called kindness is just your wishful thinking. That's enough. I don't want to listen to you. Gu Xiaoxiao covered her ears and shouted. Unfortunately, Yixian's voice continued to ring out. Did you see that? Because your brother defeated the people who bullied him, those people were afraid. They were fearful. Not only did they give your brother money, they even treated him as their boss. This is the law of the jungle. This is the most fundamental thing in this world. Hearing Yixian's theory, Gu Xiaoxiao laughed bitterly. Her eyes gradually calmed down, and she looked at Yixian and said, You're wrong. You're very wrong. I don't deny that this world might be like what you said, but if everyone loses their kindness, then the order of this world will collapse sooner or later. What's the point of us humans living then? Seems like you still believe in your theory? Yixian slowly shook his head. That's right. I believe that the world has its current vitality because of love. Look at these exotic beasts wreaking havoc all over the world. Aren't there also many fearless heroes protecting us, allowing us to live well? Gu Xiaoxiao said firmly. All right, then I'll come with you to see if this world is like what you said. Yixian slowly nodded, then turned around and walked back into the house. At the same time, the East Sea was surging with waves. The sky was dark and gloomy, and there were even terrifying thunderbolts raging in the clouds. Splash! 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 The waves hit the pier, overturning countless boats. A bloody light floated in the waves. When the waves receded, a terrifying bloody figure stood in front of the pier. He looked at the humans in front of the pier, and his bloodthirsty eyes were filled with extreme brutality. Blood food. So much blood food. Eat them, restore my supreme cultivation base. The bloody figure roared and suddenly turned into hundreds of bloody lights. They strangely and cruelly pounced on the people on the pier. Ah! What is this thing? Help! The fishermen screamed and ran for their lives. However, under the brutal devouring of the bloody soul, these fishermen were all turned into dried corpses. It was as if they had died from having their blood sucked dry. Kakik! The bloody figure appeared again and laughed eerily. Blood food is not enough. I need more. The bloody figure's aura was brutal. He walked into the distance, and the direction he was heading was actually the little river village where Yixian was. Along the way, he killed countless people. Countless people were turned into dried corpses and died tragically in the bloody figure's hands. Little River Village, Gu family's house. Several days passed. The young Gu Beichen did not go to school in town. Instead, he stayed at home to reflect on his mistakes. It was also in these few days that Gu Xiaoxiao and Yixian were in a state of cold war. At night, the sky was filled with stars. A ray of moonlight shone down, illuminating the little river village. Sister, I'm hungry, Gu Beichen said, feeling wronged. Gu Xiaoxiao sighed helplessly. She took out the food she had prepared from the kitchen and looked at Yixian with a complicated expression. However, she still called out to him. Silly blockhead, come and eat. Obviously, although Gu Xiaoxiao was unhappy with Yixian for instigating her brother, this lady was kind-hearted and always remembered Yixian in her heart. Chapter 143. Although Gu Xiaoxiao was displeased with Yixian's instigation of her younger brother, she was a kind-hearted girl and always remembered Yixian in her heart. When the three of them sat at the dining table, the young man wolfed down his food with an indescribable satisfaction on his face. He even smiled at his sister from time to time, which made Gu Xiaoxiao's anger dissipate. Just eat. Stop making faces, Gu Xiaoxiao scolded jokingly. Got it, sister. The young man stuck out his tongue. Bored, Gu Xiaoxiao turned on the television and an interview program appeared on the screen. Sister, look. It's Sword God Yi. When the young man Gu Beichen saw the program on the television, he cheered. On the television screen, a white-haired young man holding a 3-foot-long sword was being interviewed by the host. Gu Xiaoxiao focused her attention on the television screen. It's Qingning TV station's honor to have Senior Sword God for this interview. I wonder why Senior Sword God doesn't create a martial arts alliance to fight against the beasts? The host asked with a smile. Yi Lingtian was clearly over 100 years old, but he had sharp eyebrows, bright eyes, and an extraordinary temperament. He looked more like a young man. He said slowly, one sword is enough for me. Why would I need the help of other juniors? Domineering and not modest at all. This was Yi Lingtian's answer. It made the host feel awkward, not knowing how to continue the topic. Ahem. The host coughed softly to hide his awkwardness and continued. It's rumored that you've been wanting to take in a girl as your successor, but this girl has always rejected you. Is that true? The host's question made Yi Lingtian fall silent. After a few breaths, he slowly nodded and said, That's right. There are not many people who can catch my eye. This woman is extremely talented. She is indeed a cultivation genius that is hard to come by in 100 years. It's rumored that this girl's name is Linglong. She has always rejected you because of one person. This person is Mr. Yixian, who once repelled the beast tide. What are your thoughts on this? When the host mentioned the name Yixian, Yi Lingtian's expression turned ugly. He then laughed contemptuously and said, "In the Granxia Kingdom, I, Yi Lingtian, have only lost once in my life, and that person was the world's #1 expert, Shan Juexian. Other than Shan Juexian, I have never admired anyone else. In the past 100 years, no one has been able to take 3 of my swords. How can a junior be compared to me?" Hearing Yi Lingtian's words, the host suddenly became excited. Although Yi Lingtian did not point his finger at Yixian, the disdain in his words was obvious. This was big news and would definitely increase the TV station's ratings. Senior Sword God, please don't blame him. Legend has it that Mr. Yi once killed Li Huantian and the Heavenly Sword God on the spot. With his cultivation, isn't he your? Without waiting for the host to finish, Yi Lingtian sneered and said, "Li Huantian and Ba Dao are just losers to me. This interview is over." Wow, Senior Sword God is so cool. The young man, Gu Beichen, was so excited that he danced. Yes, although Senior Sword God is a little overbearing, he has been killing exotic beasts all over the place. This is enough to earn our respect. Gu Xiaoxiao nodded and praised. At this moment, Yixian indifferently watched the program on the television and didn't say anything. This caused the siblings to feel slightly strange. The youth was even more curious as he asked Blockhead, "Why aren't you excited at all when you see Sword God Yi?" "Why should I be excited? He's just an ant," Yixian said indifferently. He picked up the glass of water and took 2 sips. His posture was extremely calm. Hearing Yixian's words, the siblings had strange expressions. Obviously, Yixian was too arrogant. He did not even take Yixian seriously. "Ah, help, help." Just as the young man was about to ask, he heard a large number of terrified voices coming from Little River Village. The siblings' expressions changed, not knowing what had happened. Yixian narrowed his eyes. A blood-red light flashed across his eyes. His divine sense spread out, and an extremely bloody scene appeared in his mind. Blood soul? Interesting. It seems that the time to witness human nature has finally come, Yixian murmured, but it did not attract the siblings' attention. "Let's go and see what's happening," Gu Xiaoxiao said anxiously. She put on a coat, pushed open the door and ran out. The young man quickly followed behind his sister and left the house. At this moment, Yixian's eyes were as deep as an ancient pool. He looked at the siblings' backs and murmured, "Gu Xiaoxiao, when humans face death, when these so-called kind villagers reveal their despicable nature, will you still insist on the theory that humans are inherently good?" In Little River Village, a large number of villagers gathered in the village center. They were screaming in fear because a bloody figure was walking towards them. The brutal and cruel smell of blood around him made the villagers feel even more uneasy. "Blood food! So much blood food!" the bloody figure said excitedly. A ray of bloody light spurted out and instantly turned a villager into a dried corpse. The thick blood soul essence was directly swallowed into his stomach, and the bloody figure let out a satisfied howl. What is this thing?" a villager shouted in fear. "My child's father." A woman cried out loudly. "Everyone, don't be afraid. Let's fight it out with him." Kitchen knives, hunting guns, and even hoes. All kinds of weapons appeared in the hands of the villagers. They surrounded the bloody figure tightly, but their faces were extremely pale. "Fatherly, what happened?" Gu Xiaoxiao hurried over with her little brother. When she saw the horrifying bloody figure, her face instantly turned pale, and a trace of panic flashed across her eyes. "Xiaoxiao, we don't know where this monster came from. He has already killed many of our villagers. We must not let him go." Fatherly held a hunting gun and shouted loudly, "Sister, I'm scared." The young man, Gu Beichen, held his sister's hand and looked at the horrifying bloody figure with extreme fear. Clearly, the dried corpse under the bloody figure's feet was enough to make him feel terrified. Don't be afraid. Sister is here." Although Gu Xiaoxiao was also very scared, her brother was by her side. She tried her best to calm herself down. "Kill him." Fatherly pulled the trigger directly. The homemade hunting gun spewed out a large amount of sand bullets. A large number of villagers also held weapons and slashed at the bloody figure. Kakik. Blood Shadow let out a strange laugh. He did not dodge the villagers' attacks, and the so-called spear fire passed through his body. His blood-red palm continuously tore apart the villagers, excitedly devouring their blood soul essence. It was an extremely terrifying sight to behold. Chapter 144. One by one the villagers died tragically on the spot. Their tragic cries echoed throughout the village. The villagers retreated, their faces filled with fear. They realized a terrifying fact. They couldn't kill this monster at all. Instead, people kept dying tragically in its hands. Run! One of the villagers couldn't stand the fear anymore. He dropped the hoe in his hand and fled into the distance. As if there was a chain effect, when the villager fled, the rest gave up resisting and fled in all directions. Obviously, they didn't want to die in the hands of this monster. At the same time, Gu Xiaoxiao's face was pale. She was also fleeing with her brother. But how could the Blood Shadow give up on this bloody feast? All of you are my food. No one can escape. The Blood Shadow said cruelly. He turned into a bloody light and pounced on the fleeing villagers. Old Man Li stumbled and fell to the ground. His eyes were filled with despair and fear. But when he saw the siblings running in front of him, his eyes turned and he shouted at them, "Xiao Xiao, take your brother and leave Little River Village. I'll block this monster for you." Hearing Father Li's heroic voice behind her, how could Gu Xiaoxiao have the heart to abandon him? Suddenly, Gu Xiaoxiao turned and ran towards him. She wanted to help Old Man Li up and escape this terrifying place together. Sister. Gu Xiaoxiao's action made the young Gu Beichen's expression change. He didn't expect his sister to be so kind. She didn't care about her own safety to help others. Kakik. Blood food. What delicious blood food. All of a sudden, the Blood Shadow appeared in front of Old Man Li. Gu Xiaoxiao was helping him up. When they saw the Blood Shadow, Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes were filled with despair. "Xiaoxiao, I'm sorry," Father Li said viciously. Abruptly, he pushed Gu Xiaoxiao's body toward the Blood Shadow. Then he ran away awkwardly. Old Man Li's push stunned Gu Xiaoxiao. She even forgot about the horror of the Blood Shadow. She couldn't understand why she would end up like this when she came to help Old Man Li's sister. Seeing that his sister was about to be killed by the Blood Shadow, Gu Beichen wailed and ran towards Gu Xiaoxiao in a frenzy, disregarding his own safety. "Little brother, don't worry about me. Hurry up and run." Blood Shadow had already reached out his multicolored palm towards Gu Xiaoxiao. But at this moment, Gu Xiaoxiao was still thinking about her brother. At this critical moment, an explosive sound rang out in the air, as though the earth itself was trembling. The terrifying blood-red figure was flung backwards as a slender figure appeared in front of Gu Xiaoxiao. After escaping death, it was like falling into a dream. When Gu Xiaoxiao saw the person in front of her, her eyes gradually turned red and a mist appeared in her eyes. "Blockhead, it's you?" Gu Xiaoxiao asked with a complicated expression. "Sister, are you all right?" The young man Gu Beichen stumbled over, his face covered in tears. At this moment, Yixian looked at Gu Xiaoxiao indifferently. His voice was calm and leisurely as he said, "Do you see that? At the moment of life and death, humans will reveal their despicable nature. The so-called kindness is just a joke." The despicable nature of humans once again entered Gu Xiaoxiao's ears. She slowly lowered her head as her body trembled slightly. Why is it like this?" Gu Xiaoxiao suddenly raised her head and looked at Yixian. Her eyes were red and large amounts of tears flowed from her eyes. "Because human nature is evil. This is the real world that you see," Yixian said calmly. "Kakik." With a cruel and sinister laugh, the blood-red light rumbled and the Blood Shadow returned. However, the blood-red eyes that looked at Yixian were obviously filled with fear. "You are very strong, Scram." His roar could shatter mountains and rivers and shake the heavens and the earth. Yixian's simple word turned into a terrifying wave that sent the Blood Shadow flying again. The Blood Shadow screamed in horror and did not dare to approach Yixian again. Blood food. "I'm so hungry, so hungry." Although the Blood Shadow lacked intelligence, he could still feel the terror of Yixian. Naturally, He did not dare to approach Yixian. Instead, he carefully chased after the other villagers who were fleeing. Another villager died tragically at the hands of the blood shadow. There was a miserable howl. "Xiao Xiao, save me." A village girl was running away. When she saw that Gu Xiaoxiao was protected by Yixian and the blood shadow did not dare to approach, she panicked and begged loudly. Moo! Moo moo! I beg you, please save them." Gu Xiaoxiao's face was full of tears. However, she kept shaking Yixian's arm, hoping that Yixian would save the villagers. Looking at the tears on Gu Xiaoxiao's face, Yixian was unmoved. He slowly shook his head and said, "In my opinion, your kindness is simply stupid. Besides, I won't save them." Why? This monster is obviously afraid of you." Gu Xiaoxiao's face was pale. She could not understand. Since Yixian was so powerful, why couldn't he save these innocent people? "I'm not a saint nor am I a hero. What does their life and death have to do with me? Why should I save them?" Yixian's eyes were deep and his voice was calm. "Moo moo, you're too heartless." The young Gu Beichen reprimanded loudly. "If my sister didn't save you from the sea, how could you have survived until now?" Ha! A cruel sneer appeared on Yixian's lips. He looked indifferently at the young man and said, "You're wrong. Even if it wasn't for your sister, I wouldn't have died in this world. Even if it was as you said, that your sister saved my life, I'll still save you and your brother today. That's considered repaying her kindness." "You..." The young man's face was red, but he could not refute. "Little brother, don't say anymore. Since he doesn't want to save them, we'll save them ourselves." Gu Xiaoxiao smiled sadly. She pulled her little brother and chased after the fleeing villagers. Looking at the siblings running away, Yixian narrowed his eyes and said, "Gu Xiaoxiao, your stupidity makes me very angry. Since you still haven't understood this world, let's see how laughable the kindness you believe in is." Yixian's aura was gloomy as he strolled forward. At the end of Little River Village was a raging river. This river was so deep that one could not see the bottom. If someone fell into the river, they would be drowned in an instant. It would be a sure death. It was impossible for anyone to get out of the river. At this moment, the villagers of Little River Village were gathered at the riverside in fear. Looking at the bottomless river, everyone's eyes were filled with despair. They had reached the end of the road. Behind them, the bloody figure was approaching step by step. This was a dead end. These villagers had no way of breaking out. Chapter 145. Not far away, the siblings were running towards the villagers with shovels and hatchets. When the villagers saw the siblings, surprise appeared on their faces. This was because when they were running away, they saw with their own eyes that it was Old Man Li who pushed Gu Xiaoxiao in front of Blood Shadow and then ran away alone. But why didn't Gu Xiaoxiao die? Why was she still alive? "It's that person who saved Xiaoxiao. I saw him send the monster flying with my own eyes," a villager shouted excitedly as he pointed at Yixian in the distance. His eyes filled with hope. "That's right. It's the person Xiaoxiao took in. He saved Xiaoxiao. The monster is afraid of him. He can definitely save us," a village girl said excitedly. As the villagers shouted excitedly, the despairing atmosphere eased a little. Old Man Li, who was in the crowd, looked embarrassed and ashamed, but there was also excitement in his eyes. "Xiaoxiao, I've let you down. Can you forgive me?" As soon as the siblings arrived in front of the villagers, Old Man Li wept bitterly and knelt in front of Gu Xiaoxiao. He kept kowtowing and apologizing to her, making people feel extremely pitiful at first glance. "You scum! How can you do such a heartless thing? How can you let Xiaoxiao down? That's right. I've always respected you, but you've done such a thing. It's really shameful. Xiaoxiao, don't worry. When this monster leaves, we'll definitely seek justice for you." Many of the villagers spoke out and patted their chests in guarantee. Old Man Li kept kowtowing and apologizing to Gu Xiaoxiao amidst the curses. "Old Man Li, get up. I really don't blame you. Maybe you were just anxious. After all, people do irrational things when they're in danger." Gu Xiaoxiao bit her lips and helped Old Man Li up. This made the villagers praise Gu Xiaoxiao for being a kind child. At this moment, Yixian stood in the distance. When he saw this scene, his eyes were extremely strange, and a trace of a contemptuous smile curled up from the corner of his mouth. Human nature is so despicable, but you're stupid and ignorant. Let me see when you'll wake up, Yixian muttered in a low voice. Kakik. Blood Shadow was laughing sinisterly, but he did not pounce at the villagers. Instead, he kept an eye on Yixian's movements. If this terrifying human wanted to attack him, he could only run away pathetically. After all, Blood Shadow could sense that he was no match for this human. However, even though Blood Shadow lacked intelligence, Yixian did not attack him even after such a long time had passed. He could sense that this terrifying human did not seem to have any intention of stopping him. Blood Shadow walked towards the villagers step by step. He was also testing Yixian's intentions. When he was less than 100 meters away from the villagers and discovered that Yixian still did not move, Blood Shadow finally relaxed. A cruel and terrifying bloody light erupted from his body. Food. My food. Seeing Blood Shadow approaching them step by step, the villagers' faces changed. Only then did they realize that Yixian was standing in the distance and did not move at all. This made a large number of villagers anxiously ask Gu Xiaoxiao, Xiaoxiao, quickly beg this master to kill this monster. He won't help us, Gu Xiaoxiao said with a bitter smile in the face of the villagers. Please. Why? A villager screamed. Because he's a heartless person, Gu Xiaoxiao murmured sadly. Poochie. Suddenly, just as the villagers were stunned, a terrifying bloody hand pierced through a villager's chest. A blood-curdling scream was heard, and the glaring blood made the villagers scream in horror. At this moment, Gu Xiaoxiao was fearless. She shouted, "Villagers, we can't count on anyone. Let's fight this monster to the death today." Gu Xiaoxiao's face was pale, but she still stood out with a hatchet in her hand. Her eyes were filled with determination. Are you fucking kidding me? What do you want us to fight with? We can't kill this monster at all. Don't think too highly of yourself. Many villagers scolded and retreated continuously. They no longer had the humble attitude of trying to curry favor with Gu Xiaoxiao. However, there was a bottomless river behind them. They had no way to retreat at all. Looking at the angry faces of the villagers, Gu Xiaoxiao's face was pale. She never thought that these kind villagers would become like this. Were they still the villagers of Little River Village she knew? Don't kill me. While Gu Xiaoxiao was in a daze, Blood Shadow made his move cruelly. The villagers' corpses fell at his feet. A large amount of blood soul essence was devoured by him, turning them into dried corpses. When the villagers saw their companions die tragically in the hands of Blood Shadow, the fear in their hearts seemed to drive them crazy. People would either explode in silence or perish in despair. No one wanted to die. Even the villagers of Little River Village were no exception. And once a person went crazy, they could do anything. You damn girl, come here. Suddenly, a sinister growl was heard. Old Man Li took 2 steps and quickly came in front of Gu Xiaoxiao. Before Gu Xiaoxiao could react, he snatched the hatchet from her hand and quickly placed it on Gu Xiaoxiao's throat. He then held Gu Xiaoxiao hostage and turned to Yixian to roar. If you don't want her to die, chase this monster away. Otherwise, don't blame Lao Tzu for killing this damn girl. This scene made Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes glaze over. It was as if her soul had left her body. It was as if she had turned into a marionette, allowing Old Man Li to hold her hostage. A line of clear tears flowed from her eyes. Let go of my sister. The young man Gu Beichun shouted in panic. He raised his fist and punched Old Man Li. However, before he could reach Old Man Li, he was kicked to the ground. Little bastard, if you dare to cause trouble again, Lao Tzu will kill your sister first. Old Man Li's face was ferocious and his eyes were filled with madness. At this moment, all the villagers had gone crazy. They quickly came to Old Man Li's side and shouted, "Well done, Old Man Li. Since this person doesn't want to save us, we'll kill this damn girl." That's right. Even if we die, we'll drag someone down with us. The villagers had completely forgotten their previous attitude. At this moment, they had all turned into inhumane beasts. They even held Gu Xiaoxiao hostage and looked at Yixian. It was obvious that they wanted him to kill this monster if he didn't want Gu Xiaoxiao to die. Master, we just want to live. We don't mean to threaten you. As long as you chase this monster away, we'll let her go immediately. Old Man Li roared loudly, and the villagers all agreed. Chapter 146. Moo. Moo Moo. Save my sister. I beg you. Save her. Young Gu Beichen staggered to Yixian's side and knelt before Yixian, kowtowing profusely. Large amounts of blood appeared on his forehead. At this moment, Yixian's aura was calm and emotionless. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was only an emotionless look. Gu Xiaoxiao, do you see this? Your kindness can't exchange for the world's love for you. When your despicable nature is exposed, do you still think that your beliefs are right? Like a thunderclap from the ninth heaven, like the waves of the vast ocean, Yixian's voice resounded in all directions, waking Gu Xiaoxiao from her daze. A sacred smile appeared on her face. Silly Moo Moo, Xiaoxiao is very happy to have met you, because you made Xiaoxiao understand that this world is so colorful. If there is an afterlife, I still hope to be a kind person. A gust of wind blew, lifting Gu Xiaoxiao's black hair. She was like a spirit in the wind, smiling kindly at the world. She ignored the hatchet at her throat and pushed Old Man Li away. Like an angel, she opened her arms and welcomed the bloody shadow. Poof! The horrifying bloody hand pierced through Gu Xiaoxiao's chest. Fresh blood spurted out, but Gu Xiaoxiao's face still had a kind smile. Even at death's door it didn't change. Sister! Young Gu Beichen cried out at the sight of this. He ran towards his sister like a madman. This scene also caused the villagers to be dumbfounded. Every single one of them had extremely complicated expressions on their faces. Some of them even shed tears of shame. Rumble. Dark clouds covered the sky and terrifying lightning raged. Yixian stared blankly at Gu Xiaoxiao in front of him. The Tongtian blood light around him broke through the clouds, causing terrifying explosions to resound in all directions. The void was collapsing and the earth was shaking violently. With Yixian as the center, terrifying cracks spread under his feet. He walked towards Gu Xiaoxiao step by step. When he opened and closed his eyes, the mournful and crazy blood light seemed to be able to illuminate the world. Why are you still so stupid even when you are about to die? Yixian's aura was violent. He roared and questioned Gu Xiaoxiao. When he reached Gu Xiaoxiao, the bloody shadow screamed and retreated. Tell me why? Yixian clutched Gu Xiaoxiao's collar tightly. He was in great confusion. Gu Xiaoxiao's angelic smile was holy and loving. When Yixian saw Gu Xiaoxiao's smile, he stared blankly at the woman in front of him and clenched his fists tightly. Be myself, be myself? Yixian murmured. He seemed to have fallen into an indescribable state. Yes. Why do I cling to the troubles in my heart? Why do I cling to the things that happened in the mental demon dreamland? Actually, I only want to be myself, protect the people I want to protect. I have a clear conscience. This is the real Yixian's, this is the real me. Ha 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 ha. I am the immortal heavenly lord, a cultivator in the crossing calamity stage. But I am not even as good as a weak woman in the mortal world. Yixian looked up at the sky and laughed bitterly. As he laughed, tears flowed down his cheeks. He finally understood himself at this moment, but the price he had to pay was Gu Xiaoxiao's death. As Gu Xiaoxiao was dying, she gently caressed Yixian's cheek and said in a daze, silly blockhead. Can I see your face? Woo! Heaven and earth grieved. The wind howled. Yixian's black hair fluttered in the wind. Gu Xiaoxiao saw his delicate face. Silly blockhead, you are so handsome, Gu Xiaoxiao muttered. Her body gradually turned cold. The palm that was caressing Yixian's face powerlessly fell to the ground. From then on, she no longer had any life. Sister, don't die, Gu Beichen cried out in grief. He shook his sister's arm continuously, but he could not wake Gu Xiaoxiao up. Heaven and earth were silent and everything was silent. Yixian stared blankly at the woman in his arms. The Tongtian blood light around him tore through the sky and caused the void in all directions to collapse violently. That terrifying power moved heaven and earth. Gu Xiaoxiao, you are not wrong. I am not wrong either. It is only this world that is wrong. Yixian gently placed Gu Xiaoxiao on the ground. He released a merciless and cold aura. Looking at the surviving villagers, a merciless and cruel look appeared in his eyes. The heavenly Tao is merciless and treats all living things like straw dogs. The Tao is merciless and buries the souls of the dead. The human Tao is merciless and can kill in the mortal world. Gu Xiaoxiao, let me purge this world of despicable people for you. Let these despicable people be annihilated. Kill. The sky was shaking and the earth was collapsing. Yixian's pair of sword fingers tore through the sky, and the monstrous bloodlight seemed to tear apart the heavens and earth. When he slashed out with his sword, an extremely terrifying sword chi filled the air and instantly enveloped the villagers. Don't kill me. I don't want to die. Miserable cries and blood splattered everywhere. Amidst the desperate cries of the villagers, they exploded into clouds of blood mist one by one. Even their souls were not left behind. They were completely annihilated in this world. Everything was silent. Heaven and earth were silent. Only the young man, Gu Beichen, was holding his sister's corpse and crying in grief. Yixian watched this scene silently and did not speak for a long time. Why can't you save my sister when you are so powerful? If you had acted earlier, my sister would not have died. Suddenly, the young man raised his head and roared at Yixian angrily. Faced with the young man's angry questioning, Yixian did not say anything. He slowly inhaled and exhaled. Do you want revenge? Yes. I want to kill that monster and avenge my sister with my own hands. Gu Beichen roared loudly. The hatred in his eyes was almost tangible. Then put away your cowardly tears and come with me with your sister's corpse. Yixian said in a low voice. He turned and walked into the distance. The young man held back his tears and carried Gu Xiaoxiao's corpse to chase after Yixian. However, behind them, the small river village had already turned into an Azura slaughterhouse. Not a single person survived. The dense smell of blood drifted in the air, and the blood shadow had already fled. It was obvious that Yixian's terror caused him to be extremely fearful. Chapter 147. This was a place filled with green mountains and clear waters. There were towering green mountains and lush vegetation. A gentle breeze blew, bringing with it the fragrance of the plants. Above the mountain peak, a sea of clouds swirled. Yixian had his hands behind his back, calmly looking at the sea of clouds in front of him. No one knew what he was thinking. Life is like a dream and an illusion. The morning is like the morning dew, and the evening is like the sunset. Yixian murmured softly. He slowly turned to look at the young man behind him. When his eyes opened and closed, there was only indifference. Hatred can change a person, but it can also make a person crazy. Have you really decided to deviate from your sister's will and become an evil person that the world hates? Yixian said softly. At this moment, the young man hugged Gu Xiaoxiao's corpse in a daze. He smiled sadly and said in a low voice, My sister was very kind, but what happened in the end? She's dead. She left me forever. Since this world is filled with evil, I'm willing to be the leader of all evil and end these evil people. His voice was powerful and firm. This was the attitude that the young man displayed. Haha, Yixian laughed. However, his laughter was very old and Gu Beichen did not know why Yixian was laughing. If you want to be the leader of all evil, you have to pay a certain price. And this price may be death. Are you willing? Yixian said deeply and looked directly at the young man. Blockhead, I'm willing. The young man was resolute and did not hesitate at all. My name is not Blockhead. My real name is Yixian. You can call me Mr. Yi. Now you can sleep peacefully. When you wake up, you will face an extremely cruel test. Yixian flicked his finger and a bloody light shot towards the young man, causing him to faint instantly. Buzz! The bloody light was hazy and the void was stagnant. Gu Xiaoxiao's corpse floated in the void. Her kind smile before she died was reflected in Yixian's eyes. Gu Xiaoxiao, you used your life to help me find my true heart, and help me walk out of my confusion. This is also a favor that I Yixian owe you. Yixian muttered to himself. Rumble. The 6 paths of reincarnation rotated and a door to hell opened. Yixian's expression gradually became gloomy and a low voice sounded from his mouth. Dark Crow. Your Majesty, what orders do you have? The Dark Crow's voice came from the door of hell. Help me check a person with the Book of Life and Death. Her name is Gu Xiaoxiao. I want to know if her soul has entered Fengdu City. As you wish, Yama. In Necropolis, the Dark Crow quickly flipped through the Book of Life and Death. Lines of ancient seal characters floated before his eyes. After 10 breaths of time, the Dark Crow was startled. Through the open door of hell, he spoke with a trembling voice. Reporting to Yama. The person you are looking for is not in Necropolis. In the mortal world, Yixian was startled. His eyes gradually narrowed as a trace of gloom flashed through his eyes. His voice was grave as he said, Impossible, the souls of mortals will enter hell after death. This is also a law of the heavenly Tao. How can this person not exist? Through the door of hell, the Dark Crow could clearly feel Yixian's dissatisfaction. This made him very nervous. Yama Lord, please be enlightened. The Book of Life and Death contains all the souls in Necropolis, but the person you are looking for is not in the book. Yixian's expression was extremely gloomy as his eyes flickered continuously. He believed that the Dark Crow would not dare to lie to him. After all, he had planted a blood soul mark in the Dark Crow's body. If the Dark Crow had any thoughts of betrayal, he would definitely be able to sense it. However, Gu Xiaoxiao was clearly dead. Why didn't her soul enter hell? Yama Lord, please be enlightened. Although the souls of mortals will be pulled into hell after death, if someone interferes and detains the souls after death, I'm afraid. The Dark Crow spoke hesitantly. You mean to say that someone detains Gu Xiaoxiao's soul? That's why she didn't enter hell and isn't shown in the Book of Life and Death? Yixian's voice was cold as he had a faint guess in his heart. I'm not sure, but it's very likely. The Dark Crow spoke respectfully. You can leave now. Yixian spoke coldly as the door of hell slowly closed. On the peak of the mountain, Yixian looked in the direction of Heartbreak Mountain. His eyes were deep and frightening. Yuanling, is it you? Yixian muttered to himself. Yixian knew that only Yuanling had such means and paid so much attention to him. Yixian also knew that Yuanling had always been scheming against him. Sooner or later, there would be an earth-shattering battle between the two of them. It was just that they had yet to shed all pretense of cordiality. Perhaps some people would ask why Yixian didn't directly go to Yuanling. However, the truth was that Yixian wasn't confident. Yes, he wasn't confident. Why did Yixian want to become an immortal in the mortal world? It was because he could only use some of the forbidden techniques in the Immortal Sutra after becoming an immortal. At that time, it would be the time for him to shed all pretense of cordiality with Yuanling. He was also confident that he could suppress Yuanling and see what kind of conspiracy he had. Yixian also knew that Yuanling had always been wary of him. This fear came from the heaven-destroying halberd. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Yuanling would never shed all pretense of cordiality with him. This was also one of the reasons why the two of them were at peace. If this woman's soul was really imprisoned by you, then what do you want to do? Don't tell me you can't hold it in any longer and are finally going to make a move. Yixian's eyes narrowed as a cruel sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth. He looked in the direction of Heartbreak Mountain as a cold expression quietly flashed across his face. A grave mound was piled up with yellow soil. Yixian stood with his hands behind his back. The young Gu Beichen kept kowtowing to the grave. His face was full of tears and a strong sense of sadness spread throughout his body. If you're done crying, then follow me. Yixian led the way and the young man took a deep look at his sister's grave. Then he got up and chased after Yixian. Splash, splash, splash. There was a 1,000-foot waterfall and a huge green rock. The huge water flow poured down and hit the green rock continuously. The loud sound of the water made one's eardrums buzz and dizzy. I want to cultivate martial arts to avenge my sister. You can just teach me martial arts. Why did you bring me here? Looking at the 1,000-foot waterfall, Gu Beichen was puzzled. Slap. Suddenly there was a loud slap. A red handprint appeared on the young Gu Beichen's face. The young man covered his face and looked at Yi Xian in shock. He couldn't believe that he had been slapped so hard. You hit me? You dare to hit me? You killed my sister and now you dare to hit me? Although Gu Baichen had experienced the death of his family and had matured a lot, he was still a youth after all. In his heart, he was already dissatisfied with Yi Xian for not saving his elder sister. At this moment, this slap completely allowed him to vent his dissatisfaction. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.